No. No.
Yeah.
The June 20th, 2024 hearing for the Planning and Land Development Regulation Commission is now called to order. And if I could get everyone to please silence any audible devices you have. And if you could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. I would like to
Morning.
thank you for joining us this morning. And Ms. Tucker, could I please have the roll call?
Hi, good morning, members. Member Craig? Here. Member Costa?
Here.
Member Patterson?
Here.
Member Sixma?
Here.
Chair Mills?
Here.
And our county chair representative is currently vacant.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. We do have minutes from the May 16th, 2024 meeting. Any discussion on those minutes? For a motion?
Motion to approve minutes from May 16th meeting.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sixma, do you mind speaking into the mic? We didn't get
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
I'm making a motion to approve the May 16th meeting. I mean, minutes, I'm sorry.
Do a second?
Second.
I got a motion on the floor to approve the minutes from May 16th, 2024 for Mr. Sixman and second for Mr. Costa. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, if anyone would like to speak for or against the cases being heard today, if you could please fill out a form at the back of the dais here and hand it to Ms. Turka to my immediate left. And we will be limiting you to a 3-minute time limit. After the comments have been heard, I will give the applicant an opportunity to address any concerns the speakers have and answer any questions the commissioners may have. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Soria for legal comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the members of the audience and for any applicants that decisions on this body on special exception cases and cases which rezone a real property from one classification to another pursuant to the zoning ordinance are recommendations only to the county council and do not constitute a final hearing. So new evidence may be presented at the county council public hearing. However, decisions on variances made by this body constitute final action, subject to an appeal to the county council. And what this means is that no new evidence may be presented at the time of the county council public hearing on the appeal. An aggrieved party that appeals such a decision is confined before the record made before this body. Hearings by this body on rezonings, special exceptions, and variances are quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that this body is acting more like a court and must take into account all oral, written, or demonstrative evidence presented. Their decisions on these cases must be based on competent substantial evidence on the record, and competent substantial evidence has been defined as that evidence a reasonable mind would accept to support a conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Soria. And while we're on legal comments, I would like to ask the commission to disclose for the record any ex parte communications that have occurred before or during the public hearing at which a vote is to be taken on any quasi-judicial matter. And I'll start with my immediate right with Ms. Craig. Sorry about that.
I have none, thanks.
I did have a conversation with Randy Stollard on PUD 24-002.
Mr. Patterson?
I had a phone call from someone on a case, but no discussion.
Okay.
I had just a call, really didn't go into detail from Alex Ford on the Kraken Road case.
Okay. And I also had a call from Mr. Alex Ford on case V24048, and I also received an email from Mr. Randy Stallard on PUD 24002. Okay. We do have a presentation to be presented before us today from Mr. I'll let him introduce himself.
Through the chair, good morning. My name is Mark McManus, and I'm the Community Planning Liaison for Naval Air Station Jacksonville and Naval Station Mayport. part of my responsibilities includes Pine Castle Range. I'm also the military representative to the Volusia County Planning Commission pursuant to Florida Statute 163.3175. Typically, I comment, none of the issues that have come up in the last year have really had any interest in the Navy. We've had no objections to anything, so you haven't seen me. But today, spoke with Ms. Smith about coming down and providing you an overview of Pine Castle to tell you what's going on, and then to go over the Navy's recommendations on what development guidelines you should consider when discussing the Pine Castle Range. I brought with me Mr. Don Heaton, who is the range director for Pine Castle. So I'm going to ask him to come up and go over the range itself and talk about the operations. And then I will follow him up with talking about some of the development guidelines the Navy recommends for around Pine Castle. So I will come back in a moment, but for now, Mr. Heaton.
Hello, my name is Don Heaton. I'm director of the Navy's Pine Castle Range Complex. Pine Castle Range Complex is three various ranges that are different from each other that makes up the entire range complex. If you're looking at the map to the north, you can see a Rodman Range up there. That's around Putnam County. As we're circling around clockwise, you can see Volusia County, and that's where the Lake George range is at. And then to the bottom, you can see the Pine Castle Range. The Pine Castle Range was the first range of the complex that started, and training at the range complex started in 1941. World War II. It was back then initiated by the War Department establishing the Lake Bryant bombing and gunnery range with their, during that time, it was very instrumental in training for World War II. Actually, the War Department and the Army Air Forces acquired 40,587 acres around what is now the Pine Castle bombing range during that time. So 1951, Lake George was started during that time, and of course Rodman came in a little bit later in 1961. But after World War II ended, the War Department turned the land back over to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service, and then in 1951, the Navy came along and decided to utilize a central portion of that old Lake Bryant bombing and gunnery range for a training range, and so the Navy entered into an agreement with the USDA Forest Service for what is now the Pine Castle bombing range. To the north, we have the Rodman range, and that's 2,690 acres of Navy-owned property. There's only inert bombing, practice bombs, no high explosive bombs that occur there at the Rodman Range. If you're looking at the image to the left, it shows its location a little bit north of the Ocklawaha River, little bit to the southeast of the Rodman Reservoir and the Cross Florida Barge Canal. The center picture shows an aerial image. You can make out like a little village complex, and that is for very restrictive inert bomb training. And then over to the right, you'll see some designations for some helicopter landing zones. The Rodman Range provides a unique environment of some wetland, hardwood type environments for pilot rescues and down pilots and confined area landing zones in there. So the big training purpose for Rodman is helicopter training. Moving down to Lake George, which does border Volusia County, the Navy has a 2 by 7 mile use area that will have splashdown points. Again, it started in the early 50s. Navy's been using it continuous since then. It's an outstanding place for helicopters to do countermeasures training against electronic warfare enemy threats. The Navy owns a couple of half-acre plots on the east side of Lake George, designated Pine Island and 9 Mile Point. That's where we have a couple of towers set up there with some cameras and zoom surveillance cameras in there that we can look at that area to make sure there's no boaters in the area if the Navy is going to do some training there at Lake George. We put safety on the pilots. The pilots will observe the area and make sure the area is clear of any boaters or anything in that area before they would drop their inert practice concrete-filled mine shapes in there. But it's because it's over water, it does provide an outstanding environment for the electronic countermeasures with helicopters and flares against some enemy threat radar systems. And finally, moving to the south is the Pine Castle impact range, and that's been utilized by the Navy continuously since 1951. A year ago, we entered into year one of another 30-year special use permit with the USDA Forest Service. Pine Castle is very unique in the fact that it provides high explosive bomb training. It's the only place for the Navy's Atlantic Fleet that they can do some live bomb training. With that, the Pine Castle is in the middle of Central Florida, with near offshore areas off of Daytona Beach and Jacksonville. So that provides a unique environment for Atlantic Fleet aircraft carriers to be there off the coast to prepare aircraft to launch weapons at the Pine Castle Range. In there, they utilize the restricted airspaces that flies across all the range complex. So if we're training at the Pine Castle bombing range, we're actually flying in parts of Volusia County as they're using the restricted airspaces to drop their weapons at the Pine Castle bombing range. With that, Volusia County most likely won't notice the noise from the aircraft, but depending upon environmental conditions, you may notice the impulse noise from the high explosive bombs that we'll train at Pine Castle at. That concludes the operational portion of the. I'll turn it over to Mark.
Okay, the information I'm presenting to you comes from what we call the Range Air Installation Compatible Use Zone Manual, or RACUS, because we're the government, we love acronyms. So the RACUS is a follow-on to an environmental study that was conducted for operations at Pine Castle to consider the impact on the environment as well as the local citizens. And then the RACUS document looks at zoning and provides recommendations for local jurisdictions on what development the Navy would recommend be around the range. We consider health, safety, and welfare, the health of the people on the ground, the safety of aircraft flying over them, and things falling off aircraft and hitting the ground and exploding, and then the welfare, kind of that quality of life of airplanes flying over your house is kind of annoying. And we understand that. Starting with the end of mind, you have this handout. This is the compatible use guidelines. So when I discuss the different range zones, the RCZs, range compatibility zones, just take a reference of this. So when we talk about RCZ 1, 2, and 3, this is what the Navy would recommend as the development that should happen in these areas. Not as much on Volusia County. It's pretty much just Lake George. RCZ3, the airspace when you get into it, is about 35% of Putnam County. So Volusia is not impacted as much. So talking about RCZ1, Range Compatibility Zone 1, this is points on the ground where things are falling off the aircraft and hitting the ground. In the case of Pine Castle, they're exploding up to a 2,000-pound bomb. Lake George, it is inert. So at Lake George, it would be a shape The shape weighs 2,000 pounds, but it would be a mine. We also do, as Don discussed, chaff and flares. Flares are infrared decoys for heat-seeking missiles. I personally, as a helicopter pilot, have done those over Lake George. The Forest Service would prefer we jettison the 3,000-degree magnesium flares over a body of water than over the national forest for obvious reasons. So that is why we tend to do that there. But for the only area that's RCZ1 in Volusia is the area of Lake George. And if we're actually dropping in there, Don can go into more detail if you like. The Navy puts out public notice. We have boats out there to patrol it. We have the cameras in use, and then the pilots are required to verify that the range is clear. So there's no one out there fishing. We don't want to drop on a fisherman. RCZ2. This is the point of airspace where an aircraft is committed to the attack profile. It's on final. The master arm in the aircraft is turned on, which means the weapons rack, the weapon, everything is energized in the system. The only thing preventing that bomb from departing the aircraft is the pilot has not hit the button yet. So the aircraft is committed to the attack at the target area. RCZ-2, as you can see, it's mostly just over water of Lake George for Volusia County. RCZ-2 for Lake George extends up into Putnam County into some areas that are currently under development. And then RCZ, and there we can see RCZ-2 for Lake George. And you can see it's just over water. RCZ-3 is the airspace that is set aside by the FAA for operations at Pine Castle. It's restricted airspace. So that means that when it's active, someone that's flying their Cessna is not allowed to enter this airspace. Our airspace butts up against the NASA airspace down at Patrick and Cape Canaveral. SpaceX had to scrub a launch. They tried to reschedule it. It was during when we had a Comp 2X, which is the aircraft carrier conducting operations into Pine Castle. DOD had to tell NASA no. It went all the way up to the White House, and the DOD prevailed. So if we can tell Elon Musk no, obviously the Navy values operations here. RCZ-3, the big thing under there, it's the east coast of Lake George and the southern ends of Lake George, which is in Volusia County. The Navy's recommended guidelines is no more than 2 single-family homes per acre. I don't know if it made it in the news down here. Putnam County had a sonic boom back in February. 2 Air Force jets, I want to say that again, Air Force jets went supersonic at 500 feet and damaged a lot of homes. I got the initial noise complaints, and I responded and gave them the public affairs officer for the Florida National Guard and let them deal with it. But so we deal with a lot of airspace issues that happen. So that's why we want to try to keep the population density as small as possible. And once again, I will say it, it's a recommendation to Volusia County. Understanding Volusia County can do what they choose to do. Here you can see this is RCZ-3. That is all the airspace for Pine Castle Range. So parts of it could go active. For example, up north at Rodman, as a helicopter pilot, I would conduct landings up there, and they would just activate the area, restricted area 2906, if it was just helicopters. When Lake George or Pine Castle actual, the impact area, are active, they're going to activate the whole thing because we do not want people intruding. We'll have Hornets flying at 300 knots, 300 feet, getting ready to drop ordnance. The pilots are kind of fixated on the target. They're concerned about making sure they hit the target. The last thing we need is a local puddle jumper flying through, trying to cut through. So that is always a concern for us. Noise. As the person that answers the noise complaints for the Navy, this one's of personal interest of mine. So when there's a complaint about operations at Pine Castle, there's a noise complaint line. It is put out, a noise complaint email address. It's put out publicly through all the local media. And so for Lake George, this is the only real noise that intrudes into your county. Just to give you an idea, a whisper is 30 decibels. The office printer the laser jet in your office is about 50 decibels. In a normal conversation, non-amplified, is about 60 decibels. So you can see here for Lake George, that's the 50 to 55 decibel line. So that's the average over a day. So when Lake George is active with jets flying, the average noise over the course of a day is like a laser printer in your office. It's not necessarily that intrusive. It could be annoying if it's happening repeatedly, and I understand that, but it shouldn't be causing welfare issues for individuals. Pine Castle itself, the range noise contours do not extend into Volusia County, but as Don referenced, when a 2,000-pound laser-guided swimming pool is dropped, it will definitely, you'll feel the ka-thump. And once again, we respond to that. If there is damage, we refer it to the Navy Tort Claims Office, and then we investigate to see if the Navy actually caused damage. And if we do cause damage, then we make good and make sure the person is whole. Detonations could be heard up to 50 miles away, and that will definitely intrude into Volusia County. So with that being said, I'm standing by for any questions you may have. On behalf of Commander Kendall, the commanding officer of Pine Castle Range, I will be extending an invitation to the commission as well as the planning staff to come visit Pine Castle, to come see operations go on, see what happens, meet the people on the ground, just to give you a little more context of what we do and the importance. As Don referenced, this is the only Navy-controlled bombing range on the East Coast. For an aircraft carrier to go overseas, it needs to do end-to-end training. The pilots can learn to drop a bomb, but what we need to do is that the ordnanceman on the carrier needs to be able to go down to the bowels of the carrier, break the bomb, the guidance unit out, build that up, put it on the elevator, move it up to the flight deck. The squadron ordnancemen need to take that weapon, load it up on the aircraft, do the systems checks. Then the pilot needs to finish the job by dropping the bomb on target. This is the only place on the East Coast we can do that, because this is the only place we can drop live on the East Coast. So if Pine Castle were to go away for some reason, there is no plan B. So the Department of Defense has no interest in jeopardizing this or losing this. So with that being said, standing by for any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. McManus. Any questions for Mr. Costa?
If I have a quick question for you. At any time, are zones 1, 2, and 3 all active at the same time? Has that occurred?
Yes, if you're dropping, so if someone's going to be dropping on Pine Castle Range, then RCZ-1 is active because that's where the bomb's actually hitting. And if we go back to, you can see here Pine Castle Impact, which is the image on the right. The postage stamp is the range, the range boundaries, but the amoeba on the outside is the potential fragment danger zone. So if RCZ-1 is active, that means the bomb's hitting the ground. RCZ-2 is obviously active because the aircraft was on final to drop it. And then RCZ-3 was active because, so RCZ-3 could be active for just 2 aircraft doing air-to-air or helicopter training. If ordnance is being dropped, then 2 and 1 would be active. 3 is activated as restricted airspace. The others are, they're not, we don't necessarily turn them on. It's just a, if those operations are going on, then that area is.
On average, how many days or how many hours do you guys operate on a sortie, let's say?
So for Pine Castle for live is 35 days a year, about?
Yeah, we're doing the large weapon.
Yes.
About 35 days out
So
of the year?
35 days a year. So the Navy property and the special use permit is the postage stamp. We have to close off the safety danger zone outside. The Forest Service gives us, we're allowed to do that up to 35 days a year. For Lake George and Rodman, it all depends. It could be, conceivably, it could be 365 days a year. It's honestly not. It will come in spurts as squadrons prepare to go overseas. We'll use Rodman to do a lot of, there are landing zones cut in the trees. We'll do a lot of rescue exercises. So as the squadron is ramping up to go overseas, they'll be going there every night for a month and a half. And then there's not another squadron getting ready for another couple months. So it may be inactive. It may not be in use for like a month. So it kind of happens. Lake George has not been as active recently. If you consider the last 25 years of DoD operations, it's been over land. Lake George, for dropping ordnance, is for mines. That has not been a concern. But if you look at recent press releases of the focus of the Department of Defense now, we anticipate a significant uptake on Lake George as war at sea becomes more of a focus of the Navy as opposed to over land.
Well, regarding Lake George, so you're dropping basically inert bombs, which are concrete
Yes, sir.
containers, if you will. Do you go back and recover those, or do we just stack them up?
They're stacking up right now. The four-star headquarters in Norfolk is working with the EPA to determine how are we doing that. What is the end game of cleaning that up? Eventually, it will have to get cleaned up. They're trying to figure it out, and the challenge will be Lake George is a very muddy bottom, and so a 2,000-pound weight hitting at 300 knots is going to go pretty deep and bury itself. So that will be a challenge, but it's being
Make a good base for building upward, I guess.
Yes, sir.
When the zone is not active, is that section in Lake George open to the public?
Yes, sir.
So it's part, you just
Yes, sir.
recreationally?
We only close it when we are dropping ordnance into it.
Okay.
And then we publicly notice it, and then we have patrol boats out. So hopefully at least 30 days public notice so people are aware, but I also realize that not everyone reads the paper.
Correct.
As I get. We did have one individual ask if we could move the Pine Castle Range to someplace more isolated. When I explained to her in 1941, Ocala was fairly isolated. It still kind of is. But yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Patterson, do you have a quick question?
Yeah, I had the experience one time out on State Road 40 getting gas, and I looked up and I could almost touch the plane flying overhead. I thought came out of my shoes there. And I'm a Navy guy, so I'm okay there. I understand that around Lake George is a large eagle nesting area. Is there anything
So
to that?
the RACUS actually discusses eagles, sir. So we have not, as far as we know, bothered eagle nesting. And there are a few ranges, Mississippi and around Louisiana specifically. The eagles, they're smaller ranges, just inert only. But the eagles actually, when the aircraft show up to drop 25-pound inert weights, the eagles then start circling because those weights typically flush the small game that is in there. And so the eagles actually, it has been noticed as soon as the Navy jets leave, the eagles start circling looking for their meals. So the eagles are addressed in here and as well as in the environmental impact study. But there's been no noted interference with eagle nesting in aviation operations. And when you look at, a lot of airports have eagle nests around them because typically it's a large open area and typically near water, and eagles either are looking for fish or small furry game that tend to be located in the open area.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Craig, do you have a question?
What methods do you use for public notification, and how much in advance do you give?
So we put out a weekly email when Pine Castle will be active. Any of the ranges for Pine Castle impact for inert or live, and that goes out to our public affairs officer, pushes it out to all the local media. It's available on our Facebook page. I've pushed it many times to Ms. Smith for dissemination locally. And so our public affairs officer pretty much every week is sending out here's Pine Castle's schedule next week. It's also on the NAS Jack's website. If we're using Lake George and dropping live, that would be put out through local media, through our public affairs officer to say, Lake George, these particular days will be closed. The operations I did on Lake George as a helicopter was we had small boats pretending to be enemy craft trying to get past, and I was the blocking force trying to protect a Navy high-value unit at the south end of the lake. And so I was dogfighting a boat. It was a lot of fun. But yes, that's something that gets put out at least a month ahead of time, and then we every week we send out the weekly updates.
Okay.
I
Any other
do have one question, yeah.
Six minutes.
Well, actually, a couple questions. What's the rate of mishaps? I mean,
So since 1951, I am unaware of any mishaps on this range when it became a full-time Navy range. Don?
Yeah, there's, years ago, when they had the old A-7 aircraft,
mhm.
there was some pilots that crashed.
I'm just thinking more like some things getting dropped or falling off planes, hitting
They,
houses or people.
So the Army Corps of Engineers recently did a big, it's called a Formerly Used Defense Site, FUDS study. The Army Corps is responsible for cleaning up the old bombing ranges. The Lake Bryant range consisted of 5 bombing areas. 2.5, depending on how you want to cut it, are incorporated into the larger safety danger zone of Pine Castle. So there's one to the southwest of it and one to the northeast of it and so the Army Corps inspected all 5. They found a Vietnam era bomb that was inert. It was a training bomb. And they found a 5-inch parachute flare dropped, so to illuminate. That was the only unexploded ordnance they found doing a survey of the entire property. So that being said, there's plenty around Pine Castle impact on the Ocala National Forest. There's lots of signage that says, if you find something that looks like a bomb,
It is.
it could be, call 911. The Navy bomb squad is out of Naval Station Mayport. They are on a 60-minute ready notice to deploy down to determine if something is found in the Ocala National Forest that they think may be a military explosive. The Navy will come down to deal with it, so the Forest Service or Marion County is not incurring those costs. Though occasionally something's found. I don't want to say there's a nice piece of shrapnel on my desk that made a really nice keepsake from Pine Castle shrapnel, but I'm sure there are plenty of hikers that have found shrapnel. For Lake George, unless someone's going scuba diving and digging down in the mud, I don't anticipate any, and it's only been inert there, so there'll be no danger in Lake George. But Pine Castle itself, hopefully all people will find outside the postage stamp would be shrapnel. That potentially could have flown out there, and anything as soon as they drop, Don and his crews do a sweep of the area to make sure that we know when stuff's falling off aircraft, so they track it and they go find it.
Oh, one other question, as Mr. Costa brought up, was the debris of the concrete. Because I mean, you could basically walk across Lake George. Is shallow. Any accidents with boaters hitting stuff in the water?
No, sir.
But the 2,000 concrete, I can't see it. I mean, of course, it's going down a lot, but as much as y'all drop, it seems like some boaters would have some accidents out there.
Yes, sir. Now, Lake George was used a lot back when, you remember Cecil Field? So they had S3s, the S3 Viking. That aircraft dropped mines. We had the P3s at Shacksville, and that aircraft dropped mines. The P8 has replaced the P3. Mines are not in their inventory for dropping, and the S3 has been retired. So the only aircraft dropping mines are F-18 Hornets, and the Hornet is all stationed in Virginia. So they're not coming down here to do mine training. And as I referenced earlier, the last 25 years, the Navy's been focused on an overland fight against insurgency. So the war at sea has not been a concern. So we have not used Lake George much in the past. I don't think we've dropped last 4 or 5 years. Yeah, but we anticipate, we just got visited by the 4-star up in Norfolk that owns the entire East Coast fleet, or his staff that runs ranges, and they told us to be prepared to expect an uptick. I don't know how to describe an uptick in operations, if that's 1 a year, if that's 10 a year, but we expect Lake George to be used more often.
I can imagine the times we're in, they're going to be using a lot more, but But you did say that's the only place on the East Coast for
live.
For live, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Where'd the F-18s go?
So they can drop Navy Dare up in Virginia. They can drop inert.
Okay.
Avon Park, further south of us, you can drop live there, but that's the Air Force, and they charge a very heavy rate. You can also go to Eglin, and that's That's a fabulous facility, and the Air Force charges extravagantly to use it. That's more of a test and evaluation. We used to have the ACUS down in Puerto Rico, but that was shut down in the Clinton administration. So the only Navy-controlled East Coast bombing range is Pine Castle. So if we were to lose it, we'd be forced to go to the Air Force down at Avon Park, or go. The Navy does not want to bring a aircraft carrier into the Gulf of Mexico with all the fishing, all the sport, and the oil platforms. An aircraft carrier would just not mix in well there.
Right, plus shallow water.
Yes, sir.
I had to laugh when Don was mentioned protocol with, before they started bombing, was get all the boats out. I bet if somebody didn't listen, the first bomb that went off, they moved pretty quick. But thank you, very good information.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. McNutt? All right, sir, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
It's been very informative this morning. Thank you.
Go Navy.
Okay. All right, we going to move on here. Do we have any items to be continued or withdrawn, Ms. Smith?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, we do have some unfinished old business. We're going to call a little bit of both here. So if I can get the first case read into the record, Mr. Costa, if you can read the first case.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's O-24-004, ordinance 2024-06, 5-lot subdivisions.
Okay, good morning, Ms. McFarland. You want to?
Good morning, thank you. Carol McFarlane, Planning and Development Services Director. This is the second time this ordinance is coming to you. Clay Irvin did a presentation in February. There was a lot of discussion. Clay's not here today, but Clay and I worked 50-50 on this, so I can certainly answer any of the questions that you have. The County Council gave Planning and Development staff direction in June of 2023 to come up with a common sense way to do large acreage splits. So we're looking at, large farm holdings. A lot of times the situations that you'll see with this are, older farmers who it's time for them to retire. They can kind of cut out their house and have a smaller house so they can age in place and sell the larger farm, so they're not doing that anymore. So again, this is common sense ways to do large acreage splits. Oh, I have the thing. Okay. Did I do it wrong? I did. All right. Not entirely sure. Sorry about that, Kelly. All right. Thank you. So this is, just as I was saying, an alternative, easier path for the development of large acreage. I did use the word easy button a lot in the staff report. I hope that wasn't too annoying. But again, this is all common sense measures. So if you have a property that is a bit more complicated, so if there's questions about whether there's going to be enough land to build or where the access is going to be, if you have to build new roads, that can still go through the more traditional path of a subdivision. So this isn't, a way to find all of the different ways that large acreage could be subdivided. There's still a process for this. This is just a common sense way to do it in places where it's very obvious that all of the minimum requirements can be met. I'm assuming you just don't want me to go through the whole ordinance again. We can just talk about the changes, or do you?
No, we can just talk about the changes.
All right, great. So in the February discussion, the Planning Commission asked for, I think the word fleshed out was used. There were some questions about implementation. So we took that to heart. Multiple staff members took a look at the ordinance again. We looked at one of the things is clarifying that the land development manager is the approving body, section 72-537. If you read it, some parts are approved by the county development engineer, some parts are approved by the land development manager. So just making it very clear who the approving body is on that. Also clarified that a stormwater management permit is required. The original ordinance said stormwater management is required, so we're making it clear that there's an actual permit process and a permit needs to be issued, reviewed by the development engineers and then issued. Also clarified that the subdivision cannot result in new streets. This is something that, going back and listening to all of the discussions and the presentations, I think it was assumed that we were talking about subdivisions where no new streets would be created. But if you read the words of the ordinance, it really didn't say that explicitly. So we did add that. So if that's something we need to talk about, we can certainly do that here. Also, from the PLDRC, requested that some of these be allowed on unpaved roads. The original ordinance specifically said paved roads, so we did allow for that. But what staff's recommendation is that in order to allow it on unpaved roads, that we also have a fire safety review for the subdivision. And if the road does not meet the standards of being able to support emergency vehicles, i.e. a fire truck needs to be able to get to the house, then they may need to make improvements to the unpaved road so that the fire trucks can make it. I believe that's 20 feet wide with 13 and a half feet of clearance to the top and a 6-inch stabilized base. Also, something that the Planning Commission asked for was to add some language that if there are going to be new lots added to private roads, that the applicant needs to provide some sort of documentation proving that new units can be added to that road. A lot of private roads have a maintenance agreement between all of the parties that own property on that road. And sometimes those covenants can have restrictions that say, a certain number of homes are allowed, or, a certain subdivision is allowed in that configuration and doesn't allow for anything else. So they'll need to give us copies of that. We don't always have covenants and restrictions filed in our databases. They'll be on the clerk's office, but if you don't know exactly, how to search for it, it won't come up. So they'll need to give us copies of any restrictions. I do want to add or make 2 points that's not in the presentation. One is that there is a very small error in the staff report. If you go to page 2, that top paragraph number 6, at the end of the paragraph, there's a sentence fragment, staff recommends that if, and it doesn't say anything. That was an error that needs to be stricken. Apologize for that. And the other item is that after publication, environmental management staff had a question of if it was clear enough in the ordinance that Chapter 50 requirements for tree preservations area is, if there's enough in the ordinance to make that clear to the applicant. So Chapter 50 requires 15% tree preservation area for new lots. It does say in the ordinance, it's subparagraph J on page 6 of 7 that all other provisions of Chapter 50 apply, but there was a question as to whether it's obvious to a layperson or a property owner reading this ordinance. It should be clear to them exactly what's going to be required and what documents they'll have to provide. So staff is recommending a change on the floor. Of course, it's up to you guys how you want to vote for subparagraph A, 10A, double I, so we're looking at line 65, to add to the end of that where it says historic trees, comma, floodplains, comma, floodways, comma, and proposed tree preservation areas as applicable. So we can certainly discuss that, and staff recommendation is to add that into the ordinance. That would have to be part of the motion if that's how you want to proceed. So with that, that is my presentation, and I'm certainly here for questions, should you have any.
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Costa.
On number 4, first page, regarding the new public streets. And obviously, your slide is, you've reduced the number of words on here. So we cannot result, the subdivision cannot result in new publicly maintained streets. Is that correct?
Correct.
Paved roads, for instance. But
Right.
what about named roads? In other words, if we're teeing off of a main artery, that's no longer going to be, thoroughfare A. It's going to be called something else. So does that fall into this results in no new streets?
So there's really two subparagraphs that apply. If you're looking at the ordinance, page 5 of 7, towards the bottom, subparagraph E and F. E is...
One more time, I'm sorry, one more time on that?
Sure. Page 5 of 7, subparagraphs E and F, so you're looking at line 86 down. E says no new streets or access easements shall be dedicated to or accepted by the public. In other words, the county doesn't want to have to accept responsibility for infrastructure improvements, specifically roads that are built for these types of subdivision. And this is the easy button, right? When you start talking about dedicating roads to the county, they have to meet county standards. We have to have as-built diagrams for those. So this just makes it clear that the county will not be accepting maintenance for any new roads. Subparagraph F talks about the parent property must have access to an existing public street, whether paved or unpaved, subject to meeting emergency access requirements in Chapter 54. So, so paved or unpaved, it's quiet as to whether it's private. Then G goes in and talks about existing private easements may be accessed if the applicant can prove they have clear and free rights. So there's a couple of different scenarios where you could have the new lots. So it could be a public road or a private road. It could be paved or it could be unpaved.
Can that be, I'm sorry, Mr. Costa, but can that be accessed by easement?
It can.
The parent company?
Yes.
Because, you know, as long as it can be accessed by the easement to the paved or unpaved road.
It can be, the way it's written now on that subparagraph G, it can be accessed via an existing private easement. So this is up for your discussion, right? So if towards the end you're deciding that you want to change that, it is 100% your right to do so.
But what I want to make sure of is a lot of these properties are located off an easement, not necessarily, so the parent property would not necessarily abut a paved or unpaved road, it would abut an easement.
Correct.
Would that be considered access to the public, to the
Correct.
paved or unpaved road?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to get clarification on that. Are you through, Mr. Costa? Okay, the other thing too is these properties are classification of agricultural zoning. Going back to your tree preservation. Now, are we putting additional restrictions on agricultural property if they do this 5-lot subdivision for the tree preservation?
Not necessarily, because all of those exemptions are worked into Chapter 50. There may be some situations, especially with new developments, where additional tree requirements apply.
I think what we're going to have here more than anything is agricultural use type properties wanting to subdivide a larger parcel here, because we are talking about 2.5 acre parcels minimum. So my question to you is, why are we doing a tree preservation on agricultural property into this ordinance?
And talked a lot to our environmental permitting manager, our county forester, and a lot of these places, they already have areas that have to be protected anyway. They have wetlands, they have environmental sensitive lands, they're in the NORMA or the eco overlays. We don't anticipate that this is going to be creating any additional burdens. Again, Chapter 50 has
So why are we putting it in it?
exemptions.
Why
I'm
are we,
sorry.
why are we putting it in the ordinance?
We just want to make it clear that there may be circumstances where the easement may be, or a preservation area may be required per Chapter 50. Bella, do you
Mr.
wanna
Chair,
help out?
that requirement applies to areas that are not bona fide agriculture, that do not have the agricultural classification. If they are intending to turn it into a large lot, a single family, for lack of a better word, subdivision, that's not a farm operation. That's residential property, and the tree preservation provisions apply to the non-agriculturally classified areas.
But doesn't it already apply to that for non-bona fide agricultural use as of without this ordinance?
Well, yes, if they are doing any type of subdivision, as Carol said, this is basically reiterating. So if someone looks at this, they understand what codes apply. They don't have to dig deep into Chapter 50, which already applies to agriculturally zoned property that are not classified as bona fide agriculture. If they do the same thing, if they go through the planning process, or if they, divide once, that 15% preservation provision applies. But we want this to be kind of, someone takes a look at it and understands what they need to do, and they don't spend a lot of time digging into other areas of the code.
So we're not adding an additional layer to the A1, A2, or A3, I guess, A1,
1, 2,
A2
4.
or A4 forestry resource layer of zoning. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, all these provisions
other
already
words-
apply if they want to do a residential type development in those zoning categories.
And I think too, if these new lots do later get a bona fide agricultural use, then the number of exemptions, that they'll have more exemptions to chapter 50 as well.
This is what I'm trying to avoid. I don't want to avoid in having, if you've got a piece of property that you want to make into a pasture. And it's an agricultural property. I don't want it to run into this layer of restriction of this tree preservation on agricultural property. If it's in the code already under chapter 50, I do not think it needs to be in the ordinance to where it can be misconstrued as you go into an agricultural piece of property, and if I want to clear it for pasture, I've got to leave 15% of the trees on the property.
If you want to clear it if you're using it as bona fide agriculture, you can ignore most of the county rules and regulations. I mean, that's the Right to Farm Act. So it doesn't matter where it's located. If you're using it as agriculture, use it as agriculture. This is for the purpose of having someone with a large lots and they want to easily subdivide without having to go through the process. But we do have minimum environmental standards that adhere to any type of subdivision. And if you are using that property as bona fide agricultural, use, and you've got the, proper designation, go ahead and use it. That's
Well, if it's already in chapter 50, correct?
yes.
Okay. Then why are we putting it in this ordinance here?
For the same reason as the reminder that, someone takes a look at this and they need to understand every single thing that they should be doing. Because the whole goal is to make this easy for a person.
Okay. So we're not adding any additional layers of tree preservation to agricultural property that is not already there.
When you say agricultural property, you mean agriculturally designated property, not just zoning. Because
Zoning, I'm talking about zoning.
Yes. We do this all the time. People divide, agriculturally zoned property. They want to, have multiple houses. We require, the 15% tree preservation. So there's nothing new is
That's my
occurring.
question.
Yes.
Okay. So that's why you're putting in there just for notification.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other thing I had a question was your stormwater plan. Right now, we can do that through an affidavit of drainage control. Why is that not applied here when you can do it when the minimum size parcel is going to be 2.5 acres?
So one of the issues that was discussed at the February Planning Commission, stormwater and drainage, we've got flooding issues everywhere in the county. So this was a way to make sure that you actually have an engineer looking at the subdivision, because this section 72-537 is approved by land development staff. So this is a way to make sure that the county development engineer is involved in the process.
Okay. What happened to that easy button of subdivisions? If we're adding an extra layer there? Because right now, if I have a piece of property, right now, all I have to do is get an affidavit of drainage control for that. I do not have to go through an engineer to tell me on that large piece of parcel. And a lot of these problems that we're having is from high density. It's not necessarily 2.5 acre minimum size parcels. So me personally, I like to see the affidavit drainage control be implemented in there and as an option, rather than having an engineer coming in, unless if there's notification that there's going to be an issue. But usually that size of a parcel, we're not having that big of an impact on stormwater. Not when you're looking at one residential development on 2.5 acres.
So what we would do in that case is return that subparagraph D to what it was in February when it was first heard, which is what you would be doing is from 5.6, page 5 out of 7, subparagraph D would be striking in accordance with section 72, 788, stormwater management permit review must be approved. So that would be the phrase that would be stricken. If you want to add in, instead of stormwater management permit review, an affidavit of compliance be submitted, that is okay.
That's what it is currently, is it not?
I believe so. You get that affidavit. That affidavit happens at the building permit stage.
Yes,
So
that's what
it's a
the
way
whole.
to make sure ahead of time that we still have that compliance, again, making it very clear to the property owner how this is going to play out.
During our first discussion with Mr. Irvin is that on the stormwater side, we didn't want to have to do all that stormwater planning before you went through the permitting process, because that is addressed then. And part of that being addressed then, you're allowed to do an affidavit of drainage control currently. So to require that an engineer come in and do an engineering review on this is just an additional layer of another hurdle for the property owner to have to go through. When this got all brought about, it was for people that had large pieces of property that wanted to give it to their children or whatever without having to go through the subdivision process. And that's why you have a minimum size. I think that's why, is it A3 is not including this because the parcel sizes. Okay? So I think an affidavit would be more, just as beneficial as anything, rather than having to go through an engineer to go out there and look at the drainage control on the stormwater. Okay. I mean, I don't know if the rest of the board feels the same way I do on this, but
Can I clarify that it doesn't necessarily have to be an engineer that turns in the stormwater management permit? There are a lot of provisions for exemption. A lot of these types of scenarios would end up getting what we call a preliminary stormwater management permit. It means that they're exempt from certain requirements, but they still have to show us, where is the water going to flow. They have to draw the squiggly lines on the paper. If there's 1,000 square feet of impervious non-residential area, then they would have to get an engineer involved, but that's not what we're talking about here. This is going to be below the threshold of having a full-blown permit. Most likely it'll need that preliminary stormwater management permit, which is reviewed by the county development engineer.
okay, I don't have
Possible
one of
to
those
have it without.
affidavits in front of me, but I believe it states that you have the opportunity, the county staff has opportunity to go out and look at that. Do they not?
They do, and you're right, that is part of the normal building permit
Okay.
process.
I just don't want to add any more to it.
Fair
Me
enough.
personally,
Oh, I'm with you.
So that's where I'm at with that. Because we are looking at large parcels. It'd be different if we were looking at 60-foot lots. I get it. I get it 100%. But we're looking at large parcels and agricultural zone properties that this would probably never come up, but everyone that it seemed redundant for them to have to do it. If, let's say I've got 40 acres and I want to make 3 lots out of it, this size lots. 2.5 is the very bare minimum. And a lot of these larger parcels are going to be a lot larger than 2.5 acres if you do by the 5-rule subdivision.
So I think in that case, just to, I'm sure Paolo could help you as well, that subparagraph D in that case, if that's your motion, would be to use the language that was originally presented in the February. That would be my recommendation.
Well, the
if I would
original
do
one
that.
required a stormwater. Paolo, can you help me out on this? What was the original one?
So I can,
Because that was some of concern too. That's what brought all this about.
which section are we in? I'm looking at the old version, so,
Paragraph
so it
D.
was stormwater plan for the individual lots shall be included, and we will require the issuance of any permits for the development of the new lots. So it was just a general stormwater plan. You can provide, stormwater permit or just put, or stormwater affidavit as an alternate means. So if someone wants to provide either or,
Fine.
we're not,
I just don't want to add additional. As long as they can still use their affidavit of drainage control, which is in place today, without, on any property that, when you go to pull in a permit, you have to have that. In lieu of a stormwater plan. Correct?
yeah, we'll write it in so that it's either the permit through 80, I think that's 72, the stormwater management permit review, or the affidavit of drainage control to demonstrate adequate drainage. So that it provides a choice.
So you can do an affidavit of, are you gonna tell me you're gonna put that in there?
Well, yeah.
You can do what you currently can do. I'm not asking for anything more and above, but currently you can use an affidavit of drainage control to eliminate this stormwater plan.
Correct, and the language also reads, to be approved before the issuance of any building permits. So it does not have to be done at the
Right.
subdivision.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much. Do we have any public participation on this? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or motion.
We got changes on here, right? Are we going to leave this language the way it is?
No, we're going to make the changes.
You're going to make the change, all right?
Oh, I'm sorry, could I have Ms. McFarland come back up for a moment?
Of course.
I'd have put it in this note during your presentation. I didn't have it outlined. You said it had to be a 6-inch stabilization base. Where do you come up with that number, the 6 inches?
That is from the National
NFPA.
National Fire Prevention Association standards, which are adopted by reference in Chapter 54 of our Code of Ordinance.
Okay, so we already have that in place.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I had up there. Okay. So are we, I guess, as far as the motion goes, the, under 72-537,
D.
D, to include an affidavit, you can provide an affidavit of drainage control in lieu of a stormwater plan.
One more time.
Is that, okay? And also, I guess the easement was addressed as far as long as they can, the parent property can be, accessed through an easement, correct, Mr. Paulo? And
Yes, So
section
it
F?
can be, the easement can be paved or unpaved. We just require demonstration that the existing easement, will support any additional lots. If you're talking about,
No, I'm talking about
creation-
the parent property itself. If the parent property right now is not on a paved or unpaved road,
Yeah.
it's on an easement.
Yes.
So I don't want it to kick it out
Mhm.
because it's not on a paved or unpaved road.
Yeah.
Because the access with the easement would allow it to adhere to the paved or unpaved road.
Yes, so long as that easement meets the NFPA standards,
Right.
right.
Yeah, I get
Yes.
that. Okay. So that we don't need to address anything there? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't believe so. I think the 3 sections basically covers the parent parcel and the types of access that needs to exist prior to that. So it can be an unpaved easement. They may need to do improvements to the unpaved easement to make it meet, FAR standards.
Okay. But they, okay. Because an unpaved public road is, because there again, it may not be a public road that goes to the parent property. It could be an easement, whether it's however you want to look at it, that it's not adjacent to an unpaved or paved road, public road. I just don't want to get it locked in to where, because a lot of these properties, they're accessed by easements, whether it be 20 foot or 60 foot, you know?
I think what he's saying though, if the easement will support, you know, the traffic and whatnot, that you can use the easement to a paved road.
That's the point I want to get
Yeah,
at.
yeah,
because
and that's what we need
it's
to
not- it says
verify here.
Paved or unpaved road.
Right.
You know, Ms. McFarland?
I think what I'm hearing is that section, or subparagraph F, the parent parcel must have access to an existing public street. It might be that must have access, may need further,
Well, the
massaging
access,
to
as
get-
long as it can be an easement, that's my
Right.
question.
right. I think that we can work on that so that the have access is clearly defined.
Okay,
And I understand that you would want that to include easements.
correct.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some, we'll clarify between F and G, because G definitely implies that these new lots can take access off an existing easement. You know, the parent parcel should also be able to take access off of an existing easement, you know, so long as there are free and clear rights to it. So we'll clarify that, make sure subsection F and subsection G play nice together.
Okay, my next question is, do we need to wait for the clarifications and rewriting to move this thing forward?
Just gonna suggest
I don't
that.
believe so. We can, like,
I'd like to vote on a clean copy personally, with all the language in here, not relying on it being changed after we voted, yes.
I would concur with that.
Okay.
Just to dot the i's and cross the
Yep.
t's.
Okay, so make me a motion.
All right, well, I'll make a motion on case O-24-004.
Did we see a cleaned up
That we,
version?
that we table this back until it comes back with a clean copy with the changes we recommended on paragraph 72, 537D, F, and I believe H as well. Do we have changes on H or no?
I don't think so.
Definitely D and E, or rather D and F, sorry.
F, right.
D and F.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I got a motion from Mr. Costa as stated, and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Park. Okay. If I could get the next case, Mr. Costa, the old finished
Next
old
case is
business-
V-24-036, application of Sunburst Construction, agent for the owners, requesting a variance to the dock and boathouse regulations on urban, single-family residential R3 zone property. Property is located at 1701 Shell Harbor Road in Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Ms. Smith, this one is yours.
Yes, sir. This item was continued by the PLDRC in May because the applicant was not present and the commission had questions for them. The property is on Lake George in Pearson. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow a dock greater than 750 square feet in size. The pending building permit notes that the dock size is 1,320 square feet. It includes 2 covered boat slips, a dock, and a walkway. The applicant states that they need the extra square footage for ADA access for a family member. Staff did find that this fails 4 of the 5 criteria for approving a variance. We did note that the property is very wide, and it doesn't appear that it will be injurious to the surrounding area. But we do recommend denial of this variance.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. Any question for staff? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Could I get you to come forward, sir? Good morning, sir. You've heard us, get your name and address for the record.
My name's Aaron Chavez. We're at 1958 Ellis Drive in Astor.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I just wanted to see what I can do, your guys' recommendations for us to have this pushed forward for approval.
Okay. All right. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
Ms. Craig, go ahead.
I'm curious at the length of the dock. 276 feet seems awfully long.
The reason why we did that is because at the shoreline, it's very shallow, so we wanted to push it out in order for us to reach that 5-foot high, the dock, the walkway. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions, Ms. Craig?
That's what I'm
Okay. Any other questions from staff? I mean, from board?
Mm-mm.
All right. Do we have any public participation? All right, sir. Thank you. We're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or a motion.
Well, I don't see any detrimental value to this, to the surrounding area, so I would make a motion that we, on case V-24036, that we accept or pass the variance based with the one staff recommended condition.
Okay. If you'd mind me,
No, go right ahead.
just that previous presentation, does that get into those areas on Lake George?
This,
Staff?
it'd be on the outskirts.
I think it's in the south end of that
Yeah.
bombing range.
Yeah, Lake George, the bombing ranges are in the center of the lake. These guys are on the outskirts. But they will definitely, you're definitely going to feel the impacts, that's for sure.
They'll hear it, that's for sure.
Have front row seats.
Mr. Chair, traditionally, the military and the school board comments when you have applications before you that, increase residential density or they have a potential impact on the facilities that are to be protected. Here, they can have a house, and this is kind of an accessory structure that goes with the house. They are here. They can comment, but you're not increasing the actual density of the land that is already there.
Okay.
Okay.
Do they have to have a special permit for that, to put this dock in?
Potentially with maybe the DEP or with the Army Corps just for the dock, but I'm not aware of anything special.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah, so in fact, the homeowner does have a DEP permit that expires August 14th of this year.
Mhm.
And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers already did a layover of this property as well.
Okay.
And they had approved a permit for a dock build previously.
Yeah, so we're running against the clock.
Go ahead, Mr. Costa. I didn't mean to
No.
interrupt you
No, we're
there.
good. You want me to restate the motion? Is that what you want me to do?
Please.
All right, on case V-24-036, make a motion that we approve the variance with the one staff recommended condition.
Second. Okay. I've got a motion to approve variance V-24036 with the one staff recommended condition from Mr. Costa and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that takes
Thank you.
care of our old business, unfinished old business, like I like to call it, to satisfy all parties. So we're going to move into our new business, and Mr. Costa, could I get the next case read in, please?
Next case, V-24-041, application of, and pronounce the name for you, but Anselmo Godinho, owner, requesting a variance to the minimum yard requirements on urban two-family residential R6 zoned property. Property is located at 3521 Cardinal Boulevard, Daytona Beach.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Costa. And Ms. Smith, this one is yours also.
Hello. The applicant seeks to reduce the north side yard on their property from 10 feet to 3.42 feet for a single-family home that will be demolished and replaced. This is a legal non-conforming parcel. The residence was built in 1948 at 1,088 square feet. They want to demolish the house and rebuild it in the current footprint. It is a 50-foot wide lot. Side yard setbacks are 20 feet combined, so it's either 10 feet on each side or 8 and 12 feet. The south side yard is already 10 feet, and then the north side yard is 3.42 feet. It is a very modest-sized home at 34 by 32 square feet. There is a garage that straddles the property line. It will remain a non-conforming structure, and it can stay in place until it's damaged at beyond 75%, as determined by the property appraiser. The applicant does not wish to get a variance for the garage. The application does meet 4 out of 5 of the criteria for recommending approval for the single-family residence. And the request is to rebuild in the setback instead of shifting the footprint is a result of the applicant's actions, so we couldn't recommend approval for that criteria. There is only one criterion that the applicant failed, and we are required to recommend denial because it doesn't meet all 5 criteria. I'm available for any questions.
Which is the one that failed?
The applicant requested it.
Oh, the applicant requested it. That's the only failure?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, it's going back in the exact same footprint, correct?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay. Gotcha.
Was this a hurricane damage by chance?
The applicant is present and asked that he can answer that
Okay,
question.
all right. Any other questions for
The garage that
staff?
straddles the property line, what is the other property? I mean,
It's the adjacent property to the east. It
and
looks like historically they shared a garage. They entered it from the same driveway and shared the garage at some point. But again, the applicant is present and can provide that information.
Okay, any other questions for the staff?
Nope.
All right, is the applicant present?
I am Anselmo Godino, and I'm at 248 Bald Eagle Run, Lake Mary, Florida.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to the report?
Just that the house, obviously built in 1948, it's 76 years old, been there with that same setback for all that time without any incident. The neighbor directly north of me also has 3-point-something setback. If I was to lose 6.5 feet by going to 10, I would lose over 200 square feet, which is equivalent to 5 bathrooms, 5 by 6, or equivalent to a 10 by 20 garage, a 15 by 14 master bedroom. I would lose a tremendous amount. Obviously, this complied way back when they built it. It complied for 32 years after that, until 1980 when you changed the setbacks. Being that it's such a narrow lot, I would want, I need to keep it as big as I can.
All right. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, what's the cause for the rebuild? Was it hurricane damage or just deterioration damage?
No, it's 76 years old. I mean, the wiring doesn't meet code. I'm sure the plumbing's galvanized
Okay.
pipe. None of the windows meet code. The doors don't meet code.
So-
Egress through windows doesn't meet code, which would mean cutting the windows, new headers.
Mhm.
I mean, it's almost not cost effective.
You tearing down to the slab or taking the slab out and repouring?
I would tear it completely out. The slab has a slight dip in it.
Got it, okay.
Foundation has settled.
All right.
It's just, it wouldn't make sense to pour a lot of money into it as it is.
Understood. Thank you.
The roof is looking pretty rough, too.
Well,
Look over that picture.
we just had a recent hurricane last year,
Mhm.
and I knew I was going to try to redo it, so I didn't want to spend money on it.
No, I agree.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
And all the homes in the area have 4 foot, 5 foot, 3 something. So it
Yeah,
would
I
not
think
be
some of
any
the
different.
zoning requirements, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Smith, are 5 feet.
Mhm.
Is that what the,
That's correct, and the applicant is correct. In this area, they are very small lots with very small
Okay.
homes. And many projects have come to you to get variances in this area.
well, one of the main concerns about the side yards is be able to access it for fire control. Let me ask you this, sir, would you be able to do this with a 5 feet? Because some of our zoning classifications have a 5-foot yard setback. You're asking for 3.42, which is.
Well, it's a weird number. I was gonna try to change it to like 4, make it a nice round figure. So I get a lawnmower through there, basically.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because of the fire control and everything, a lot of the zonings require a 5-foot
I do have 10
setback.
on the other side.
Pardon me?
I do have 10 on the other side.
Yeah.
In fact, I have 12 point something.
Okay, but my question was, is would the footprint work for you if it were 5 feet?
Yes, it would. I would prefer the most I can get, obviously.
Right.
I mean, it's only 1,000 square foot as it is now. I plan to retire there, and by the time I have 1 bedroom, where the kids gonna sleep if they visit me?
Well, the reasons these setbacks come into play is because you have to have access in the event of an emergency or something to access the rear yard. Whether, I'm just saying that's normally the reason those setbacks are put in play.
Right. And I totally get that. I guess my only point would be that all the other homes are that way. This one has been that way for 70, 60 years, and without any problem.
Yeah, well, that was just a suggestion, that's all.
Right. And if I was to remodel it, then it would stay at 3.42 for the next 100 years. So, I mean,
Okay,
I just want to be more comfortable.
okay. All right. Okay, do we have any public participation on this? All right, we're gonna close the floor for public participation, and open up for commission discussion or motion.
I would say, because the existing footprint is the way it is, that I'd like to just see it the way it is, since he has the 10 feet
Okay.
around the other side, so.
That was just a suggestion.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I'm willing to make a motion here, case B24041. Make a motion for approval with the 2 staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Sixma to approve variance V 24041 with the 2 staff conditions, and a second from Mr. Costa. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, that house and I were built about the same time, so I hope nobody's gonna tear me up one of these days.
Well, we were going to say something to you about that.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Costa, could I get the next case?
Case V-24-043, variance to reduce the minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R3 and resource corridor RC zoned property located at 410 South Peninsula Drive, Port Orange.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mr. Shams, this one's yours.
Hi, good morning. The applicant is requesting 1 variance to reduce the north side yard from 15 feet to 6 inches for a new dock, boathouse, and boat lift. The property is currently developed with a single-family home and approximately 624 square feet of dock structures. They're looking to replace what's there and marginally expand to 648 square feet. The property itself is 50 feet wide, which is a bit atypical of the R3 zoning, which requires 75 feet, but the property, since it is developed with a permitted structure, satisfies our nonconformity ordinance. The constrained width presents a challenge for the property owner when designing, as our code requires 15 feet on each side, which leaves them about 20 feet of width. So what the applicant is proposing is a width of 34 feet when you count all the structures together. They're attempting to replace a dock built in 1987, which is in nearly the same location, And the reason for doing so is to accommodate their boat without entering the neighbor's property. However, staff had to recommend denial as the variances failed to meet 4 of the 5 criteria. Mainly because this is not the minimum variance that could be requested, as the dock could be designed to be smaller, and it would expand a nonconformity. Though should the PLDRC find evidence to approve, staff recommends 3 conditions, and I'm available for comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shams. Any questions for staff? Mr. Shams, you said there's an existing structure there now?
Yes, sir.
And what's the setback on it?
I believe it's either 1 foot or 3 foot. Let me get that. Yes, if the applicant's here, they can answer that question. I don't have that
Okay.
exact figure.
Is the applicant present? Yes. You want to come forward, sir? Good morning, sir. If I could get your name and address for the record.
Michael Buck, 4010 South Peninsula.
All right, sir. You've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
So your question was, what's the clearance right now of the existing dock?
Yes, sir.
And on the north side, it's 3.5 feet, and on the south side, it was 12 feet. So basically, I'm just trying to replace that existing dock with the same thing I have, but the thought was to move it to the north property line, so I would only have to request a variance on the north side, and the south side would have a 15-foot clearance. So that's the reason that it's slightly different than what it is existing. But the intent was to just replace a 30-year-old dock with the exact same thing I have.
Yes, sir. I understand that. And so, in lieu of requesting a variance on the, what'd you say, the south side?
On the north side, reducing the variance from 3.5 feet to 6 inches, and then that allows me to have a 15-foot clearance on the south side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
And currently it's a 12-foot setback on the south side.
on the south side, it's 12 feet and 3.5 feet on the north side.
Okay.
And it's been like that for 30 years,
Right.
more than 30 years.
Right. That's why I was wondering what the existing structure looked like on there. Okay. Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's a 50-foot lot, and it's typical of the other docks in my neighborhood, and the other properties in my neighborhood are all 50-foot lots. And there, I mean, the picture you have another view that shows all the other docks that are similar to mine.
On page 11 of 19, you can see the existing dock and all the adjacent docks.
Are these some boats or something on the north side in this picture that looks like it goes all the way to the property line? But is that a structure, or are those some
A couple of kayaks.
kayaks? Okay.
Okay, do we have any questions for the applicant?
No.
All right.
Can I ask something?
Go ahead.
So are we moving the whole walkway Closer to the north side?
It's starts at the same place, but in the end, yes.
It sort of veers.
Yeah, it sort
veers
of
out that way,
it
yes,
sort of
I'm
veers
saying.
that way to make it center.
But the structure itself, because like I said, it looks like it's on the line all the way across.
It will be on the line. Right now, actually, it's 3.5 feet from the line.
Mhm.
And so when it's rebuilt, it would be right on the line, 6 inches off the line, actually.
Approximately how far, I see that your neighbor next to you, once you go to the line, do you have any idea what
About-
distance there is right there between the two of you guys?
On the north side, wild guess, I would say it's 25 to 30 feet.
Okay.
Is
Good.
that, you would agree with that?
Difficult to tell from a picture, but it's fine.
So it's plenty of room to get boats by. Okay.
Yeah, but it's too shallow. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, but yes, boats can get back there. I've been back there, not on purpose.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant?
Nope.
Okay, do we have any public participation forms for this? Okay, hearing none, we're gonna close the floor for public participation, and open up for commission discussion. Mr. Soria, is it advertised as a variance? If we were to, could he possibly get the variance on the south side too today? He's not asking for that.
Yes.
In the event we were to make it the same footprint as it currently is? I'm just concerned about encroaching more on the property owner to the north, that's all.
So long as it's not the same variance, then yes, he can come back. I think the criteria is,
It would be a 3-foot, right now he said 12 foot.
you know,
A 3
I
foot.
think the question was, can he come back for the southern section if he needed?
No, could we do that today, is what I'm asking.
Oh,
could
can
we-
you put it in
Variance
the
on
same?
that south side. He's not requesting that today because he was gonna go ahead and move it to 15 feet.
Right.
But if he takes the 15 feet, he needs 6 inches on the north side. He could leave it as existing footprint at 3.5 on the north side and 12 on the south if
you
we need
wanted-
the existing footprint.
If the commission decided to not grant this variance and to basically allow him to replace it at the same position, he would need to come back because it would require a variance both on the north side and the south side.
Okay. That was my question. Okay?
One thing I want to ask Halo also, the neighbors got their notices on this, right? Okay.
Got no
Okay,
letters of
and no
opposition.
objections, okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm ready to make a motion on this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll say case B24043. Give our approval with the 3 staff conditions?
4.
4?
Yep.
Okay, 4 staff conditions.
Oh, I take it back. I'm sorry. I read the wrong paragraph. You're correct. 3.
3,
Three,
okay.
3.
Yeah, 3 staff conditions.
And we got a second?
Okay. I'm just looking at this. Okay, I got a motion on the floor to approve variance V24043, the 3 staff conditions for Mr. Sexton and a second from Ms. Craig. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Next case?
Yes, next case, please.
V-24-044, application of John Corneal, owner, requesting a variance to increase the maximum lot coverage on a PUD zone property. The property is located at 2531 Cross Country Drive, Port Orange.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mr. Shams, this one's yours.
Good morning. The applicant is requesting one variance to maximum lot coverage from 30% to 37% for an outdoor patio expansion. The property is approximately 13,000 square feet and developed with a 28,000 square foot residence and a 1,500 square foot airplane garage. Both structures were constructed in 1992, and the current owner purchased the home in 2020. The existing structures total about 4,400 square feet, which is approximately 34%. So based on the current structures, lot coverage is already exceeded. The applicant wants to replace and expand the patio for additional outdoor living space due to disrepair. The expansion would be approximately 342 square feet, which would expand the nonconformity. If approved, the structures in total would be about 4750 square feet, or 37%. Overall, staff recommends denial as the variance fails 3 of the 5 criteria. But should the PLDRC approve, staff recommends 1 condition. I'm available for comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Shams. Any question for staff?
No.
Hearing none, is the applicant present? Come forward, sir. Good morning, sir. Could I get
Good
your
morning.
name and address for the record?
My name's John Corneal, 2531 Cross Country Drive. As stated, I bought the house about 4.5 years ago. It's located in the Spruce Creek Flying Community, a planned unit development, and subject to property owner association and architectural review committee oversight. Built in 1992, a review of the POA architectural drawings for the property indicate that it was, in fact, still is as built in 1992, which exceeded the 30% lot coverage by 4%. As stated, on the northwest corner of the rear of the house is a narrow L-shaped porch. The porch framing has deteriorated, the roof's leaking, and the structure needs to be removed and replaced. In order to have more comfortable outdoor living space, I'm proposing a modest increase of 340 square feet to widen the porch and create a more functional lanai. As required by the community's bylaws and regulations, the plans submitted here have been reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee and unanimously approved. The committee chairperson and 1 other member are adjoining property owners. So it's my request that you please approve the variance. Thank you. I can answer questions.
All right. Any question for the applicant?
I do.
Mr. Costa.
This, the Bonnie, was it Rydell that sent the letter of support? Is she on the planning commission?
She is the chair.
Chair
Yes.
of the ARC review? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Do we have any public participation forms for this one? All right, sir, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or a motion.
I'll make a motion, case V-24-044, that we approve the variance with the 1 staff recommended condition.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to approve variance V-24-044 with the 1 staff condition from Mr. Costa and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Costa, could I get the next one, please?
Case V-24-046. Take it back. 045, application of Robert Gast, owner, requesting a variance to the minimum yard requirements on transitional agricultural A3 zone property. Property is located at 323 Van Hook Road in DeLand.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Ray, this one's yours.
Good morning. The applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the south front yard from 40 feet to 20 feet for a single-family residence. The subject property is currently developed with a single-family residence that was built in 1957, and it already encroaches into the setback at 30 feet. The proposed single-family home would replace this one. The property is a flag-shaped lot and was subdivided in 2023. Staff's recommendation is for denial as the request fails to meet 4 of the 5 criteria. Should the PLDRC find that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, there is 1 condition provided for your consideration. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff?
Just clarification, this is on a curved section of road?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, is the applicant present? Would you come forward, please? And state your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Robert Gast, and I live at 295 Van Hook Road.
Okay, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
Yes, so there is a large clump of live oak trees that I'm trying to keep, and if I move it back the 40 feet that's required, I would have to cut down 6 of the trees. This is a picture showing the live oak trees on the left side and the existing home in the front, which is where I'm building, would like to build a new home in the same location. And then if you go to the next picture, that shows the rest of the trees on the right side with the same old dwelling there. And then if you go to the last picture, it will show you a view down to the neighbor's house. And the palm tree and the oak tree in the front yard would stay there as is. And the home would go between the larger trees that are already existing on the property. And the other reason for the reducing the front yard setback is because currently the remainder of the property from my property line to the roadway is owned by the people across the street. When they built the roads originally, they cut through corners of lots. So the first 50 feet of my yard isn't mine, and then my property line starts. And then I gotta go 40 feet back from the already 50 feet off the road.
Okay.
So that is why I'll still be around 65 to 70 feet off of the road, which is farther than the neighbor's house that exists is off the road. So that is the reason why I want the reduced front yard.
All right, sir. Any questions for the applicant?
That last picture makes the house look really nice.
Okay, do we have any public participation for this one? Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. We're gonna close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or motion.
I am ready to make a motion on this.
Go ahead, Mr. Six.
Case B24045, make a recommendation of approval with the one
Staff condition.
staff condition. I think it's only one, right? Yeah.
Yep, just one.
One staff
I'll
condition.
second.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor for Mr. Sixsmith to approve variance V 24045 with the one staff condition, and a second from Mr. Costa. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Costa, could I?
Case V-24-046, application of Ty and Corian McDonald, owners, requesting a variance to the minimum yard requirements on a prime agricultural A1 zone property. Property is located at 170 Wright Grove Road in Oak Hill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Costa. Ms. Ray, this one's yours.
The applicants are seeking a variance to the south front yard from 100 feet to 75 feet for a proposed mobile home. The subject property is heavily treed and has a pond to the southwestern portion of the property. It is currently developed with a 2,400 square foot barn. The property does have an agricultural classification through the property appraisers. The property has 3 front yards and 1 side yard. There is a 30-foot ingress-egress easement to the north, Wright Grove Road to the east, and Gator Bait Lane to the south. Staff's recommendation is for denial. Should the PLDRC find that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, there is a condition provided for consideration. We did also receive a letter of support from an adjacent neighbor. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant here? Good morning, sir. Could I get your name and address for the record?
Yes, sir. Ty McDonald, 170 Wright Grove Road.
All right, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Just trying to keep it where it's at. I was unaware that there could be 3 front yards on the property when I originally did the site plan. I guess because my neighbor has a right-of-way on his property that the setback goes from 50 feet to 100. We have it set at 75. I was plenty out of that. But just trying to keep it there. We already have our well, our existing well over there, and septic permit's already in place for where it's at. If I have to move it, I'm probably have to take out some more oak trees. I pull a 40-foot trailer home every night, so trying to avoid from doing that on the other side of the property is trying to get pasture over there, so I don't want to have to move it to the opposite side of my entire property as well. That's
Okay.
it.
All right, any questions for the applicant?
I think I'd stay away from that gator bait lane if I was you.
I haven't seen any yet.
Okay, do we have any public participation forms for this one? All right, sir, we're gonna close the floor for public participation, open up for
Appreciate
commission discussion or motion.
Make a motion on case V-24-046, approve the variance with the one staff recommended condition.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa to approve variance V-24-046 with the one staff condition, and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Next case, V-24-047, application of Carlos Marquez, owner, requesting a variance to the minimum yard requirements on urban single-family residential R4 zone property. The property is located at 8th Avenue, DeLand.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Ms. Ray, this one's yours.
The applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the west front yard from 25 feet to 10.9 feet for a proposed single-family residence. The property is currently vacant and heavily treed. The property contains wetlands on approximately 6,982 square feet in the eastern portion of the property. The single-family residence was placed as far west to avoid the wetlands, but it does encroach into the 25-foot wetland buffer. Staff's recommendation is for denial. Should the PLDRC find that the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, there are two conditions provided for consideration. I will also add that environmental permitting reviewed the application and had no objection. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff?
I'm curious.
Ms. Craig, go ahead.
If they have no objections to it, what is this about the wetland mitigation permit being required? Or there being a hold on the wetland permits?
I believe there's a wetland alteration permit. We issue wetland alteration permits for the buffer impacts as well. So as demonstrated on the chart, you can see they're not affecting the wetland area. However, because, you know, there's not, they are placing the house in the wetland buffer, impacts the wetland buffer require a wetland alteration permit.
We do have a letter from our environmental permitting team in the staff report that says they have no objections to the request.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant present? Good morning, sir. Could I get your name and address for the record?
Carlos Marquez, 2375 Seven Oaks Drive, St. Cloud.
Okay. You've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
Yes. So the reason why we mentioned the hold on the permitting for the wetlands is that if we do not move the house forward, then we would be into the wetland. And it's our understanding right now that there's a hold statewide on the permitting for mitigation of wetlands. And that is why we're asking for the variance to move it forward. That way we only have to deal with the permitting here at the county for the buffer. And yeah, that's my comment on the question that you had.
Okay, so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So this variance is to basically move the house out of the wetland area?
Yes.
To avoid, okay, now it's clear.
Yes, yes.
Okay, much better, thank you.
All right. Any other question? Any questions for the applicant? Okay. You're aware that the wetland buffer there, you stand a chance in a heavy rain event of having quite a bit of water there. As long as you're aware of that.
I'm aware. Yeah.
Okay. You raise it up.
Yeah, I'm aware. That's all right.
All right. Do we have any public participation? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion. Thank you.
Just one more question. Is there anything that we could do to move it forward? That way we can have it approved, or
Well, we haven't approved the variance yet, so, but
Oh.
if it becomes, then you would have to talk to staff with
Yep.
about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, with that, I'll make a motion on case V-24-047 that we approve the variance with the 2 staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion on the floor to approve variance V 24047 with the 2 staff conditions for Mr. Costa and a second for Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Mr. Costa, if I can get the next one.
Case V-24-048, application of Landis Graham French Attorneys at Law, agent for the owners, requesting a variance to the accessory dwelling unit ADU regulations on transitional agricultural A3 zone property. Property is located at 371 McCracken Road, Lake Helen.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mrs. Smith, this one is yours.
This is a 9.5 acre site in the A3 zoning classification. The applicant is seeking a variance to allow an accessory dwelling unit to be greater than 50% of the size of the principal structure. This is an existing structure. Unfortunately, the applicant's husband had passed away, and he took care of most of the business at the house, and she found after the fact that this was not permitted. So she's trying to resolve the issue and wants to get an after-the-fact building permit. She cannot get that building permit unless she addresses the size of the ADU. The ADU is 1,423 square feet. The maximum that would be allowed in this case is 1,083 square feet. The principal structure is 2,155 square feet. The ADU has been in place since 2011. It's a large parcel. It's been in place for a very long time, and it would create a hardship to require to remove 340 square feet to bring it into compliance with the zoning ordinance. There are multiple letters of support in the file from the neighbors, and we do recommend approval. The applicant's agent has asked for one correction to condition number 3 to now read, "No additional expansion," and add the words "to the ADU may occur without a new variance," and we support that change. And the applicant's agent is present.
And there was 3 conditions on that?
Yep, 3.
Okay. Okay, any questions for staff?
Nope.
All right, hearing none. It's your turn.
Mr. Chairman, Alex Ford, 145 East Church Avenue, DeLand. Ms. Reeves is also here in the audience, and she came to me initially with great trepidation. She had discovered that the property had some improvements that had been made without permits, and just didn't want that hanging over her head. She found out after her husband died about these lack of permits, and so she took a very bold step of self-reporting and then coming to staff and asking for how do we get out of this situation. Staff was very helpful, and we, after going through getting it surveyed and doing some investigation, working with staff, we determined there was really only one variance that was necessary, and that's what's here before you today. That's to approve a ADU in excess of 50% of the size of the principal structure. As Ms. Smith noted, it's a pretty modest increase that we're asking. It's been there a long time. We have neighborhood support. I don't know if any of y'all got a chance to drive out there, but it's a kind of, God's little, piece of heaven here on earth. It's a really nice piece of property, and they've done a good job. The neighborhood supports it. They're great relations with the neighborhood. This is the type of thing that we ask that you would consider. And if you have any questions, be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I ask that you adopt the staff recommendation with the revision to the one condition.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. Any questions for the applicant? All right, do we have any public participation for it? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or a motion.
Make a motion, case V-24-048, that we approve the variance with the 3 staff recommended conditions with the addition of no additional expansion to the ADU be written into that 3rd condition.
Second, yeah.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to approve variance V 24048 with the three staff recommended conditions, with the exception to the clarification on condition 3 to make it just to the ADU itself. And from Mr. Costa, and a second from Mr. Sixman. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Mr. Costa, the next one.
Case V-24-053, application of Gary and Mary Brannock, owners requesting a variance to increase maximum lot coverage on urban mobile home MH5 zone property located at 167 Douglas Street in Edgewater.
Mr. Shams, this one's yours.
Good morning again. So you may remember this case from last month, but upon further review, staff did determine an additional variance was necessary to increase maximum lot coverage. They're applying for a variance to increase the lot coverage from 35% to 45% for an in-ground pool. The existing principal and accessory structures total about 3,070 square feet, which is 47% lot coverage. So the applicant's plan is to reduce the size of the patio, which would in turn reduce the lot coverage on site to 45%. Overall, staff is recommending approval as they meet 5 of 5 criteria, and I'm available for comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shams. Any questions for staff? Is the applicant present? The applicant's not present. Okay, do we have any public participation forms? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion.
I hate giving approvals without applicant present.
I know, me too.
Is this the same one we had before?
If I can just clarify, please, that was actually a staff error. We should have included that lot coverage last month. They were here for that meeting.
Now
and
that you
did
put it that
approve-
way.
Yeah.
It was a
You
staff
did
error,
approve
okay.
everything
Makes us
else.
feel better.
Completely different.
So we're just trying to do some cleanup here so they can get their building permit.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I prepare to make a
Better.
motion on case V-24-053.
Okay, let me close the floor for public
Okay, sorry.
participation, and then
Okay.
I would have a commission discussion or a motion.
Okay.
Miss Craig, you had a question.
I'm curious about this part where it says it's unclear if the requirements of the Class 2 overlay can be met. Is that an issue for us to be concerned with?
No, ma'am, when they go in for a building permit, they will have to apply for that, and they'll see if they need to do those things, which the Class 2 permit would be landscaping and stormwater controls, and they have to meet those in order to get the building permit.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'll open it up for discussion or a motion.
Go ahead,
All
Mr.
right.
Costa.
Motion, case V-24-053, that we approve variance with, I think it's one condition.
I don't, is it one condition?
Actually, with no staff recommend, no conditions.
Right, second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to approve variance V-24-053 from Mr. Costa and a second from Mr. Sixman. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Mr. Costa, could I get the next one?
Case V-24-054, application of David Wagner, owner, requesting a variance to the minimum yard requirements on split zone transitional agricultural A3 and urban single-family residential R3 zone property. Property is located at 1655 South Glencoe Road in New Smyrna.
Mr. Ray, Miss Ray, this one's yours.
The applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the west rear yard from 40 feet to 30 feet for a proposed attached garage. Like you mentioned, it is split zoned A3 and R3. The proposed structure is to be built within the A3 zoning classification, so it is subject to those minimum yard requirements. The proposed garage is greater than 500 square feet and therefore is required to meet the principal structure setbacks. The staff's recommendation is for denial. However, should the PLDRC find the applicant has provided competent substantial evidence, one condition has been provided for consideration. I will also note the west property that it does encroach is a county park. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff? All right, is the applicant present? Okay, if you want to come forward, sir, and give us your name and address for the record.
Larry Gross. I'm representing Mr. Wagner at 1655 South Glencoe.
Okay, and what's your address, sir?
My address is 201 Barracuda Boulevard, New Smyrna Beach.
All right, you've heard the staff report. Anything you'd like to add to it?
Not at the moment. Just that.
Just here to answer questions, huh?
Yeah, it is backing up to the county Frisbee golf course, and just that there is, a lot of traffic and a lot of talking, and he's just looking for a buffer from his residents.
Okay. All right. Any questions for the applicant? Do we have any public participation? Okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion. Okay, guys, let's do it.
I'll make a motion for approval here. Okay, B24054 with one staff recommendation.
Second.
I'm sorry, Mr.
I know, I
Secretary.
gotta do that. Thanks, Kelly. Motion for approval for case B24054 with the one staff recommendation.
Still second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Sixman for V24054 for approval with the one condition, and a second from Mr. Costa. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Do we need to wait for,
No, we can do it with 4,
with 4? Okay.
as long as we don't have a dissent.
Yep.
Okay.
So that passed.
Motion carried 4-0. Mr. Patterson had stepped away. Okay. The next case, please.
PUD-24-002, application of Allen Engineering Group, Inc., agent for the owners, requesting a rezoning from urban single-family residential R4 zoning classification to a planned unit development with a residential subclassification PUD. The property is located at 525 East Kentucky Avenue in DeLand.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. This one is Mr. Shams.
Hi, good morning. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from R4 to PUD to construct 50 market rate townhouse units. We did receive 2 letters of opposition, which have been provided to you. The property is approximately 8.61 acres, and the applicant has agreed to dedicate rights-of-way along the western, southern, and eastern boundaries to the county. After dedication, the area being used for the site is approximately 7.8 acres. The PUD will be developed in one phase and is expected to commence in 2025. The project is within the City of DeLand's utility service area and will be serviced by central utilities. Staff did find the project meets the county's PUD requirements and will dedicate 20% or approximately 1.56 acres as common open space. There will be a 20-foot wide landscape buffer along every boundary and a maximum building height of 35 feet, which is consistent with adjacent residential zoning classes. The proposed PUD is consistent with the existing urban medium intensity future land use designation and comp plan policies related to urban infill development and discouraging urban sprawl. Under the current future land use, the property can yield a maximum of 68 dwelling units, so they're well below that. As regards to traffic, the current R4 zoning could generate about 499 daily trips, and the proposed PUD, as applied for, could generate 366 daily trips. So it is an overall decrease of traffic. So overall, staff recommends forwarding to the County Council with a recommendation of approval. I'm available for comments or questions.
Any questions for staff? Ms. Craig?
How can the traffic requirements be reduced if we're talking about adding 50 housing units?
So it's comparing the maximum yield of the site with under R4, which is 68 single-family units. So when you propose 50, it is a decrease.
I see, okay.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other question for staff?
One other question.
Mhm.
Sure.
and it just may be my unfamiliarity with it, but on pages 37, 39, and 40, it mentions 54 units. And
I'm sorry, Ms. Craig, do you mind speaking a little closer to the microphone?
sorry,
Thank you.
on pages 37, 39, and 40, it mentions 54 townhome units as opposed to the 50 in this request, and I'm wondering, is that just because there was a change from the February 19th presentation?
Ms. Craig, I think I can answer that question for you. What you're reading is our staff comments. Typically, applicants who are proposing developments will come in for a staff review before they apply or at the beginning of the application process. They came in with this number initially, and after receiving all their comments, came in with their final plan.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Shams, this R4 zoning, the original zoning that is now, that's for single family. This is considered multiple family, correct?
So townhomes are considered attached single family, so they're still going to be individual owners.
It would be individual, so it would be considered single family?
Yes, sir.
Fee simple.
Okay.
And I have one more question. Is there any idea why there was no comment by the school board?
The school board reviewed the project and found they have the capacity to meet school concurrency.
Currency.
I thought I saw in here that it specifically said there was no comment by the school board.
So, Ms. Craig, that again is the staff review comments. For every project that comes in, we require it to go through school concurrency. We do have the school concurrency letter.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, is the applicant present? Mr. Woods, good morning, sir.
Happy to be here this morning. For the record, Michael Woods with the law firm Cobb Cole, 231 North Woodland Boulevard, here today on behalf of the applicant, and excited to be here to discuss an infill project within the greater DeLand area. I'll go through the staff report, pretty much explains the conditions of what we are asking for with the 50 units. This is coming in as a PUD, and it is coming with a product that I think is very necessary and needed in the area, that is being a townhome product. Yes, it's single family, yes, it's fee simple ownership, but it's different than the 50-foot lots or the smaller lots that you end up having, and trying to, it's not affordable housing by any stretch of the means, nothing really is at this point, but trying to fill in that missing gap of housing, and being able to make sure that we locate it in the right place. Again, the summary and the scope there, it is going to a PUD for 50 units. I do want to emphasize one of the reasons why, you know, I'm here and on board with this project and pitching it as strongly as I will be today, is the existing underlying urban medium intensity. And I'll kind of show you how that fits in. This is not kind of a selection airborne drop into it. This is part of the overall structure out here. And that is a challenge to kind of deal with, as you guys are familiar with the city of DeLand's, let's say, irregular boundaries as we've kind of grown back out to 1792 into Woodland. So this still is within the county's jurisdiction, but serviced by the city limits. And ultimately, I think fits in with both situations there. And if you're familiar with the roadway, Garfield folks travel up there north and south. South of us is George Marks, and I'll kind of show you the frame of reference to what we're dealing with. Another big benefit is we are, as an infill project, existing capacity is already there in place. And then the other commitment, and this will come into play, I'll circle back up when we talk about the boundary along our eastern boundary, but we are dedicating a substantial amount of right-of-way. The roads are out there already, it's fine, but they're all deficient from a size perspective, so the county will be getting the additional right-of-way to be able to make the roads fully conforming by dedication for our property. Again, the frame of reference there with 92 to the north and 17 to the west. Just so you kind of have a frame of reference for what we're dealing with here, I took a measurement. The purple and the, I guess, orange or red colors are the ones I want you to pay attention to most. Going from the intersection of Kentucky and Garfield north to 92, you're about 0.3 of a mile. For frame of reference, that's the Athens Theater to the new courthouse. So that's the length of the distance that you're dealing with there. And then just to give a gap, although we do not connect to Clearview to the north, that's 0.2 of a mile. And then if you go to the west along Garfield, for your frame of reference of where Garfield spits out on 92, that's the IHOP and the family bookstore, that's Garfield there. And then you've got those apartments, the Land Oaks condos are where that green line kind of goes to. Then obviously we have single family surrounding our property. So from our land use standpoint, like I said, this is a bit of a mishmash of jurisdictional fun. You can see all the INCs, the incorporated area. You do have a larger subdivision to the east. You have urban low intensity to the south of us, so that's definitely single family homes, I think up to 4 units an acre there. Obviously to the north, and then along Woodland, you've got the commercial corridor. Dropping the parcel numbers to kind of give you the shapes of what we're dealing with, this is the configuration, right? This is kind of SimCity. I always go back to that computer game of how you kind of plan through this. You've got commercial along your corridor. You've got your urban medium intensity as the transition between the commercial to the traditional single family, and then you've got the single family. And so we are smack dab on that urban medium intensity transition between the commercial to our north and west, and then the single family even to our south. As part of the PUD and kind of what you get in addition to just the overall development, because of the PUD, you've got the 20% requirement for open space. We may need to talk a little bit about that I got the letters from the neighbors this morning with respect to the amenities that we provide, so we may be able to be a little bit more sensitive on that. But we do have an obligation to provide that 20% because of the PUD. You do get the tree protection area that's required. And then a unique element of this project is we are keeping the internal roadway privately owned, privately maintained, and gated. And as you can kind of see from our configuration of our project, that keeps all of our stuff internal. Now, I'm a big believer of interconnectivity a lot, but then we also have those conversations about, well, the spillover from, I mean, it's still residential, it's still single families living in these units, but there is this perception of single family detached homes next to townhouse, and will be a self-contained project this way, and this helps to kind of configure with that. You'd also, because of our access and our design, you don't have more driveways accessing, other than the one on Kentucky, multiple driveways accessing onto the roadway. And I provided here just to kind of give the frame of reference of what would otherwise be required for your front yards by surrounding zoning categories that are there, 30 feet, 20 feet, your side yards. We provide a landscape buffer minimum of 20 feet along the entire project, and it gets bigger in certain places. I'll kind of show you through that on our concept plan. And then we have a 45-foot building setback for all portions of the property, other than on Smith Road on a portion of that, and I'll explain that to you. And all of those measurements are measured after the dedication of the right-of-way. So before I had gotten those letters, I thought it would be a good exercise just kind of show you what it would be like standing from our perimeter, looking in for how we design this to, again, be self-contained here. So we're going to go kind of around the horn, starting in the bottom right corner, with what that experience is going to be from the street level. This is the southeast corner of our property. On the right side that you can't see, that'll be Smith Road, and we'll circle back around that at the end. But you're looking north from the right-of-way. We have a dedication to now include a sidewalk. There is no sidewalk along that portion of Garfield or Kentucky, and you will have a sidewalk for, I don't know that the county will actually want to end up building the sidewalk on Smith, but it will be constructed for Garfield and Kentucky. And so as a result, with this portion, after you get through the dedication, and that dedication measures out, that 35 feet for right-of-way dedication measures to the center line of the asphalt. So you'll have the improvement for the roadway there, an additional 35 feet of landscape buffer, TPA, and that would most likely keep the natural vegetation that's already there. And then from the edge of property through that 30 feet of landscape buffer there, you don't get to a building or structure for 48 feet. On the next location, this is now in our southwest corner. Again, right at the corner of Garfield and Kentucky. We've put a stormwater pond on our western edge of the property there. But here I want you to be able to see, so if you're across the street from here, again, the dedication of the right-of-way, We have a 25-foot landscape buffer. It's not counted as TPA because it's too narrow for TPA, but that's to accommodate the sizing for the pond. But if you look to the east where the buildings are, that is still the 30 feet and a tree preservation area there. And again, sidewalk will be included. This now going along the north-south roadway, Garfield, looking from Garfield to the east. Obviously, you've got the retention pond dry, but you do have a landscape buffer on the external area. And then I think the building, the closest to the edge of the building from that roadway, because of the pond being there, is about 145 feet. Moving to the north there, this is looking from the south, looking south from that property line. Again, you've got the 30 feet of landscape buffer and TPA, and then the closest building is 45 feet from the edge of the property. Similar, like if you were still in that same parcel, and again, I hadn't read the letter from the neighbor until this morning, but I did this up earlier this week. Here where you can kind of see the reference and orientation, you do have a 30-foot landscape buffer between the edge of our property. That's still there. It tapers down to 25 feet right at the corner, and that's mainly because of the curvature of the roadway, not necessarily that anything else is going to be removed there. And when we come back and circle around for the comments, probably the pickleball court, we can talk through that. Some people love them, some people hate them. We're not committed one way or the other as to what amenity goes there, and we can relocate or swap it onto the other side. But again, edge of building looking to the east is about 83 feet away. And then from the northern side of the project looking down, you still got that same 30 feet landscape buffer, and you're 45 feet from the edge of the property to a building face. Now this is going down Smith. We're looking at the northeast quadrant, and you can kind of, for your frame of reference, you've got the drive roadway. The light gray rectangle on the top right is planned as bocce ball. That's definitely much more passive unless you have really wild and crazy bocce ball players. So, sorry, that may be a swap with the pickleball, where we do 2 bocce ball courts. But here again, you've got about 90 feet from the edge of the property to the easternmost building. You do have the 30 feet of landscape buffering for the majority of this property. This is the roadway that is the most efficient, and we'll kind of show you the aerial photo and the street level photo. And the county is getting a 20-foot right-of-way dedication here. That comes into play for the southeast corner here, because I don't think that the full scope of the dedication was realized when this was being laid out. And so what you have here with this unit, and this is again back to the southeast corner, there's 25 feet of building setback from the property line after the dedication of the right-of-way. Now, I don't think that the county intends to develop that right-of-way or the roadway. They just have in reservation, because ask for it now because you can get it. But we're still treating it from the permitting standpoint that there's 25 feet. It will be landscaped, but that's a distinction. That's the narrowest part of our property from where a building is from the edge, and that is being driven because of the additional right-of-way dedication. And then just to kind of give you here, this is looking north on Smith for the adjacent property there. And I was curious from like the measurement from the center line how far back everything went. But effectively, if you can see that red dot and blue dot on the aerial photo using Google Maps, that's basically 83 feet, give or take, from the center line north. That's to kind of reference the southern face of our property here. And then to show you the northern extension of this building cluster, that's this picture here. So it lines up just north of that driveway from that home. Again, still buffered, but giving kind of a proximity and spacing in conjunction with what's already there. Again, from that standpoint, the entire building is south of that neighboring home to the east. And at closest point, the building faces 65 feet from the neighboring property line because of the asphalt, the dedication, and the setback. So again, I know I flew through that kind of quickly, but we're here with the UMI density already there. We're coming in with 50 townhome units. I think Mr. Shams told you what the allowable density is with the 8. We think it's a good infill. I know that there are still plans moving forward with the county to try to address overall sidewalks on that corridor, particularly on Garfield, and we are able to contribute that as being new development. They just didn't require it back in the day, and I think we kind of come to regret that, but we're doing our best to improve that. so that you'll be able to easily access. And again, the, Garfield North spits out at Lowe's and like the AutoZone on the south side of 1792. I'm happy to answer any, let me actually get into the letters. So again, there was one question dealing with, the traffic flow, and your question, I completely understand the calculations of how you're adding constructions, how you go down. Even more than that, the average trip generation for like townhouses get treated slightly differently than single family, if you can kind of believe that. It's traffic generation kind of at its best, but the right-of-way will be expanded. The mitigation is necessary at site plan for traffic improvements will be necessary, but we are in that UMI, and that kind of contemplates the traffic being, we're not bumping up and asking to break the underlying comp plan and push that further. And we will be providing sidewalks along our portion of the property there. The other question, I think, was coming from one of the adjacent property owners, I think that might be our one to the northwest, but either way, there's a question about how will these be marketed. These will be private fee simple ownership lots. So with respect to that pickleball and the bocce ball court, we've not provided for any fencing or screening. We're happy to do that, or we're happy to switch. Again, I don't play pickleball. I know a lot of people do. I'm happy to have feedback on that. It was just more to have a passive activity opportunity for our residents. But we do have to provide something for them there. So if that's horseshoes or something else, like we can work through that with you. There will be no lights, and that facility, like the common area facility, be closed at dusk. We can provide that as a condition. Like I said, we could screen around the play area to deal with the noise. There's a reference to the minimum lot size or minimum unit size in here is at 575. That's your default language. These units are more likely to be between 1,600 and 2,000 square feet. And the height would be the standard height of any two-story home. That's where we're capped at 35 feet. That's what's utilized for all your single-family subdivision requirements. We do have the buffering, like I said, we went through that, and happy to go through any other questions on that from how are we trying to buffer. And within that buffer, we maintain and preserve as many of those trees in there as possible. And that's it in a nutshell. We think it's a good infill project to give a different housing product in close proximity to existing stores. And we think we've tried to be as considerate as we can for our surrounding property neighbors. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Any questions for the applicant?
You wouldn't have to have any pictures of sketches?
Right now, it's anytime we're coming forward with any townhome projects, you want to make sure you get the entitlement kind of in place before you go full on. Right now, all we have is the sketch that Kim Buck Engineering had designed for that.
All right.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm curious about the statement here in one of the letters in opposition. It says the builder plainly states their purpose is to provide housing stock for Stetson University. I've lived in a university area, and it got unpleasant at times of the year. It was University of Texas, and football weekends were a nightmare. I can envision that being a real issue for anybody who's been living in this nice, quiet neighborhood for all these years. Can you?
Sure, and I had to ask the developer who's here about that question. I think the focus point there is more of a price point of below the $320,000 average price now for like a single-family home. I'm not, and he may be able to speak a little bit more directly as to the conversation about Stetson University specifically. I would say that the idea is not for it to be rentals. It is for fee simple ownership. And there would be a property owners association to maintain. Like, for instance, the no operation of the bocce ball, well, not that a lot of kids are going to do bocce ball and pickleball, but to not operate beyond 8 o'clock, that can be controlled there too. But it's the same situation as you have, and I think kind of point out, along Garfield, right, we had the tornadoes kind of come through a couple of years ago. And a lot of those homes, the older homes, there was a good number of kind of student housing folks living in there as kind of roommates and stuff like that. So, you can't preclude someone just because they're a college kid, but this isn't being designed for the purpose of being student housing. The land I don't think the county ran afoul of this. The land for the longest time had the no more than 2 unrelated people in your home, which was basically an anti-party requirement from the downtown. It blatantly violates federal law, you know, and it really conflicts with how you would define a family unit these days, or non-traditional. But all that is to say, this isn't, the goal here isn't for a Stetson housing project here whatsoever. It's townhomes to fit through the folks that, at $450,000, $400,000 for single family homes, there's a whole lot of folks that aren't getting ownership. And this is hopefully to bridge the gap between being able to rent and be able to own without going to single family.
Okay, Mr. Woods, we do have some public participation.
Can I ask him one more question?
Okay,
real
Mr.
quick?
Costa.
Mike, I did hear you say that's going to be gated, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and the way that would work, obviously during the day, it would be open for Amazon and all this good stuff with that, but then it would be a gated controlled at night with a call-in for pizza delivery and stuff like that. And you will see on the design, there's a T-shape at the bottom there. That's for the turnaround, so the vehicles get there after hours, for delivery and stuff, that they don't block or anything, so, yeah.
Okay, we do have some public participation forms, so after they have spoken, I'll give you a chance for rebuttal.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, Mr. Wine. Morning, sir. If I could get your name
Morning.
and address for the record.
I'm John Wine. I live at 295 Spring Garden Avenue, De Leon Springs,
Okay, sir.
and I am an owner in this, part owner of the property. I want to just, I know I've got limited three minutes. I want to take 3 things to make it clear. First of all, I myself and the builder, Atlas Homes, Randy Stoddard, has been in this area a long time. And I don't have time to get through all the technicalities because the pros have covered that. I just want to say that our reputation says that we're good neighbors. And Florida is a growing state, and there's a cry for affordable homes. And frankly, all the projects that we're working on, they're crying out for affordable homes. Now, as a developer and builder, if it's not a sin to make money, then the only way you can produce that is through the townhome concept. You don't have to be a smart person to figure that out. So my real desire at my age is to be able to say that we have fulfilled a need in America, because there's a cry for particularly starter home buyers that can't afford homes. So I want to just state that that it's not just the land, Volusia County, but other areas are screaming out for townhome developments to meet that need. Now, the other thing I want to say quickly is 2 things. The tree issue is always an issue, and we paid a professional tree expert to come out there, which he did, and we've still got tree mitigation. But the first thing he told me was, Mr. Wine, these are all laurel oaks. And there's no specimen trees on that property. They're all laurel oak. So our tree impact is going to be more minimal. We've got a development in De Leon Springs, and you don't want to hear about that one because it's got some real tree issues. We have no tree issues on this property, in fairness. And the other thing is that from the beginning, the county encouraged us. They suggested, maybe is a better word, that would we consider a private development instead of public. So we have felt that going to a private would do a lot of things. So we have decided to go to private development. We've got a full buffer around it, and I would live there personally in that subdivision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay, then we have and I hope I don't mess this up, Kim Pathusic. I'm sure you'll straighten me out once you get up here. Can I get your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Kim Potthews, and I live at 1402 North Garfield.
So, some of my concerns about this project are with the wildlife that's there right now. What are the plans for, because what's going to happen is they're all going to scatter. So we'll have an increase in raccoons, and there's a cat colony there and all kinds of stuff like that that concerns me. I'm also concerned about what kind of fencing they're going to use since it's going to be gated. I don't really want to look at white PVC fence when I leave my house. I'm also concerned about how it's going to impact taxes for the houses that are there now, because I would assume that something like this would probably cause a raise in taxes down the line. And I am concerned about traffic, because traffic is really bad at that intersection of Kentucky and Garfield already. There's pretty much a wreck there at least twice a year, and it's constant traffic. So I don't see that this is going to help that. But basically, those are my concerns. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, and I have Susan and Michael Boyd.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Could I get your name and address for the record?
My name is Michael Boyd. I live at 1411 North Garfield. My property backs right up to the project we're talking about. You want to say, can we do this together? So I might get mad and say something I shouldn't, and she'll hit me with her elbow.
Perfectly all right. I might give you a little extra minute.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I have a few questions that I feel like I just got run all over by a big truck right there with the fast talking there in the beginning. A duplex, in my knowledge, is a multifamily building. Am I correct?
Mr. Sawyer, you want to answer that question?
So if
We have it defined as single-family attached. Mainly it's due to a building code type thing. So duplexes are their own thing. They're considered odd in that a person owns the building and they own the underlying fee simple, they own the land. They share a common wall with their adjacent neighbor. Townhouses are similar in that a person owns the building, they own the underlying land, they share one or more than one wall with their adjacent neighbor. In our code, townhomes kind of straddle the line between multifamily and single family, but they are defined as single family attached dwelling units.
Same thing then, right? Duplex is a multifamily, right? Two people live welded together, or four people live welded together. Then they say that they match the two-story houses in the area. There are no two-story houses in the area. They're all one-story houses in the area. When we moved here, we looked for a nice, comfortable place that had zoning around us, where they were not going to tear down all the trees and build an apartment complex. And now here they are. Now all of a sudden we've decided that all of our trees that are 40 foot tall and this big around are worthless because they're laurel oaks instead of whatever kind of oak is worth more than that. I'm going to be looking out of my backyard. I have a beautiful, pristine backyard, and I can look out, and I'm going to be looking into the windows of the second-story apartments. And you cannot, or somebody's going to be out there playing bocce ball. I'm not even sure really what bocce ball is, or pickleball, and they're feet away from my backyard and my privacy. I really don't believe his story about being housing stock. He would not have entered it in his story to convince you if he hadn't meant that he intended some of that to be housing stock for Stetson. There's a lot of more beautiful things in town, or Stetson is beautiful, but there's a lot of more things in town that draw people to DeLand. DeLand is a beautiful city. We live literally 3 blocks. This development is literally 3 blocks from 92. It's not right on the highway. It's 6 blocks or 5 blocks from 17. So we're not right up next to the highway. We're not in a building glut area. So, okay, then, they talk about they're gonna put in sidewalks. You guys have tore up my whole road and run both sides of the street putting in sidewalk.
No, a bike path.
A bike path, you call it. Is that different than a sidewalk? It's 10 feet wide instead of 4 feet wide or 5 feet wide.
And all the trees came down.
Okay,
Nobody
if you'll
replaced
speak in the
any.
mic, if I could get you to speak in the mic.
Oh, sure. So with that 10-foot bike path, they took down all the trees on one side of the road. Nobody's replaced that. So this gentleman from the attorney was talking about putting in sidewalk on Garfield. So is he gonna put an additional sidewalk along the front of our side of the road,
Okay.
you know?
I'll get him to address some of the concerns that you've got.
Okay.
He's gonna come back up for rebuttal, and hopefully some of the concerns you have can be addressed or maybe explained fuller, okay?
Okay, that's all?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much. All right, do we have anyone else? Ms. Tucker, okay, Mr. Woods, if you'd like to come back.
Okay. Michael Woods for the applicant. So with respect to the sidewalk, and I don't know how the county is treating the sidewalk location in relationship to the multimodal with the bike. Right now, we are required to comply with the requirements of the county, and that is to provide improved sidewalk on Kentucky and Garfield, as I understand it, and then right-of-way dedication on Smith. Yes. Now, if anything has changed from that, because as I understand it, the Garfield Trail was running along the west side of Garfield, is that correct? Okay. If that has changed, obviously we can work through that, but as we are here now and required, we would be putting in the sidewalk as part of that dedication of additional right-of-way for Garfield, right? Because the way that Garfield is paved right now, it's not quite as narrowly constrained as, say, Smith. That one's is basically compacted roadway and what have you. But the asphalt doesn't reflect what the actual right-of-way is, right? We oftentimes have that situation where people think their front yard goes to the asphalt, and the reality is the right-of-way is basically where the power line poles are. And I think you saw that with, and I guess that's probably the city's Greenway plan that's been going through, that you could see a pretty huge trail going through there. But our requirements are coming from your staff and from your code, and at this point in time, for the western perimeter and the southern perimeter of our property, we'll be providing sidewalk. With respect to the statement about the two-story homes in the immediate area, didn't mean necessarily to say that, other than to say, I know two-story homes come up as an issue, but that's why you had the 35 feet. Like, two-story homes are not themselves a bad thing or a nuisance. There are a couple two-story homes farther down on Garfield I know of, or split level that are there. But with respect to how it impacts on this project here, again, even with their adjacent property, it's 45 feet with 30 feet of landscape buffer to their south, and then even farther over to the east. And part of that too, and why I kind of emphasized earlier on in my presentation about like the table of what is required for the setbacks for straight zoning versus what have you, is you would still be able to have, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this was like a single family lot division, like the pool could be 8 feet off the property line, right? So we are sitting back farther than from single family. It's a difficult balance, and you know, again, we're trying to keep everything tightened in as best that we can for this, but hopefully I answered those questions. And then from the tree mitigation, that goes through what your forester, whether that's through Keith or with Ginger, for mitigation and impacts on that. But I think the goal is for the perimeter side to remain natural, because why would you want to cut out and then replant? Keith doesn't like that.
What about the type of fence? Have you got any proposed type of fence?
I don't think so. And I think the fence requirement comes from a buffering. Is that part of our landscape buffer? Do you guys recall off the top of our head?
I mean, I'm just asking one of the questions that there was asked.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I forgot that. And even like from the fencing perspective, like even along Garfield, I don't know if they would require us to put it on the edge of pavement for Garfield, or on the other side of it, well, probably so because of stormwater. That is a requirement from the code provision. We're happy to not do white PVC as well. The gated community aspect, when we kind of refer to it as that, that's mainly because of how we control the vehicular access. That's that gate, but it's not like we are looking to like lock in and cage in. To the extent that there's a fence requirement, that's coming out of your landscape beautification buffer requirements, and we're complying with that. We're not getting any relief from that with our request.
All right, any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, how much again did you say these were going to run a unit?
I was talking to Randy, he was saying about 3 1/4.
Okay.
Which scares the hell out of me, but you know, it's, no, and I wanted to come back in and say that that's not coming in, and this is not an affordable housing project.
That's what I was thinking, 'cause I
No.
thought affordable housing is.
But what you're really kind of seeing the squeeze is, you know, it's a whole other kind of conversation to try to get true affordable housing projects in. I'm sure you guys have seen your fair share of them. And there's particular developers that do that because of the compliance requirements for the feds and everything else like that. But as that has kind of gotten the focus and the attention, that gap of, you know, the interest rates kind of being where they are, no one's kind of really selling out. There's this sense of this inventory kind of shortage, because if you're in a home with a 2% interest rate, you don't want to
leave.
You don't want to leave because you're going to be paying more for less house. Downsizing, it doesn't make sense. So all of that is to say, go scare yourself and pretend that you're looking for like a 22-year-old or a young family and see what the inventory is, not on Zillow or on Realtor or something.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers just keep, and I keep waiting for something to slow down, and it just hasn't. So this is a product that we just really haven't had in the greater DeLand area. There's more coming online now, but we had been so focused coming out of the crash on the single-family residential, and no one wanted to be the first developer here to do townhouses, right? There's that proof of concept. You had a few smaller here or there, like I think Ken Goldberg did 1 or 2, but now that there's been 1 or 2 that have been built, and people see how quickly, I mean, I don't think there would be, I think there'd be a line waiting to get these if they're coming on. So
This is more in tune. The term affordable housing throws people into a different tizzy. This is more, I would call this affordable market rate housing, is really what you have.
Or attainable is the other word.
Yes, these are starter homes. This is something that my son might be able to afford right now, because other than that, there's nothing in that price point.
Yeah.
But I think in general, it's a good project. You're required to leave X amount of undisturbed vegetation around the perimeter, correct? Is that
we're required to maintain 15% tree preservation.
15%,
and
okay.
you can only get the tree preservation credit if you're 30 feet wider, and so that's why those buffers have been bumped out.
Okay.
Where we couldn't do it on Smith, there's still that landscape buffer that'll be there, but we don't get credit for it there.
So that buffer would alleviate some of the concerns about the 2-story units.
That's the thought process, yeah.
Okay.
And you mentioned something about swapping the pickleball for the bocce ball, no lights anyway, so.
Yeah, we for sure, it's not going to be lit for those purposes. I just trying to get ahead of the issue. You know, we try to come up with something that's passive. You are dealing with site constraints. Obviously, we're not going to put in like basketball or tennis courts from a size perspective. Pickleball typically is innocuous, but I've never lived next door to one, and I don't know. So that's really kind of at discretion. We can figure it out now. We can figure it out for county council, but we will be providing an amenity facility there, and to the extent that we need to screen anything from a noise perspective, we can do that. But you will have, irregardless, you will have that 30 feet of tree preservation area there in between.
Okay.
And so we'll be farther off than any single-family swimming pool that would be there otherwise if developed. You know.
Okay, any other questions?
Not for him, no.
Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Do we have any more public participation? Okay, we're gonna close the floor for public participation, open up for commission discussion or motion.
Well, I have one comment to make, and actually this is directed to staff. As I read through this and I'm arguing some of these questions on here, I noticed that there is no individual's name or address on one of these opposition letters. It's the very detailed one, the very first one on here. It doesn't specify who this came from. So I would ask, I should say, that in the future, that if we don't have identification on the letters, that they not be included with the package.
Okay.
Outside of that,
I'd like to make a comment here also that a lot of the concerns being brought forward today, this is an R4 zoning originally. It's an urban single-family residential. So as far as the wildlife and things like that, you're going to have that even if you were to deny the PUD. The R4 zoning in itself would allow it to be built up. Two-story houses are allowed in any neighborhood, any residential neighborhood up to 35 feet. So, believe me, I sympathize with the adjacent property owners with all the development that is occurring, and it seems to be a little bit overwhelming. But under the current zoning, I don't see what really holds this back. It sounds to me like they've taken the adjacent property owners into consideration with their buffers, and hopefully they'll be able to coexist. That's my comment.
Motion.
And I'll accept the motion or. I need a motion. Wake up, guys.
You want me to do it? All right. I'll make a motion, case PUD-24-002, that we move this forward, this rezoning application to the county council with a final action recommendation of approval, subject to the staff recommended conditions.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa to forward the rezoning application case number PUD 24002 to county council for final action with recommendation of approval, subject to the staff recommended conditions, and a second from Mr. Sixma. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Costa, could I get the next case, please?
All right. The next case, should we read both of them together? CPA and the PUD?
Yeah, we can take both of those on.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Excuse me, we are still in a public hearing. If you don't mind taking conversation outside chambers. Thank you.
All right, PUD-24-002, sorry, wrong one. CPA-24-004, application of Land Development Resource Group, LLC, agent for the owners, requesting a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment from the Urban Medium Intensity UMI Future Land Use FLU designation to the Commercial COM FLU designation. Property is located at 3728 West International Speedway Boulevard in Daytona Beach. And the accompanying is the PUD-24-006, application of Land Development Resource Group, LLC, agent for owners, requesting a rezoning from the urban single-family residential R2 zoning classification to a planned unit development PUD zoning classification with a business subclassification. Property located at 3728 West International Speedway Boulevard, Daytona Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. And this is Ms. Ray.
Good morning. So I will talk about the comprehensive plan amendment first, and then I will talk about the PUD.
Okay.
So the proposed future land use change is from the urban medium intensity to commercial on a 1.76 acre site. The applicant is proposing to utilize the site for a contractor's storage yard. Under the UMI future land use designation, neighborhood businesses are allowed as commercial uses. However, any more intensive commercial use would need the amendment to the commercial. The property is surrounded by other commercial properties. It is currently developed with a single-family residence and carport that is proposed to be removed. The commercial commercial designation has a floor area ratio of 55%. The applicant is proposing to construct a 9,000 square foot office and warehouse facility. The FAR would be approximately 12%. Staff's recommendation for the future land use amendment is to find it consistent with the comp plan and forward to County Council with the recommendation of approval. For the PUD, the applicant is proposing to rezone from R2 to PUD with a business subclassification for the contractor's storage yard. There is currently a code violation on the property for having the heavy equipment on site, and this proposed rezoning would resolve that issue. The property is located within the High Ridge Neighborhood Local Plan, and that plan requires any new development on a lot exceeding 1 acre in size shall be processed through the PUD procedures. The PUD is proposed to be developed in 3 phases. Phase 1 for all infrastructure improvements. Phase 2 for the construction of the 9,000 square foot office and warehouse facility. Phase 3, the extension of the parking area. The property is also subject to the thoroughfare overlay standards and non-residential design standards. This PUD is contingent upon the proposed future land use amendment change to commercial. Staff recommends forwarding the rezoning to County Council for final action with recommendation of approval. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, is the applicant present?
You're here.
Well, we got you to be up there before noon.
Well, that's true. It's still morning. I forgot my jacket in the car.
I can get your name and address for the record, ma'am.
Pauline Miles, Land Development Resource Group, 140 South Beach Street, Daytona Beach, Florida. I'm here to answer any questions. Staff has been fantastic with this. I was contracted by the property owners to first get them out of code enforcement action, which code has been delightful as well. Went to them yesterday to say I was going to be here today. This should bring them into compliance, and that's kind of our goal.
Okay.
My goal. Sorry. I can answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Okay.
I think they did a pretty good job putting it together.
Seem like we have any. Do we have any public participation forums? I don't think our reporter here wants to ask. Anyway, okay, we're going to close the floor for public participation and open up for commission discussion. If you'd like to wait for Mr. Costa to get back,
we'll
for him
wait
to get
for him.
back. Just a few minutes. Or we can go ahead and start a commission discussion. We're moving right along. No, well, no. So, commission discussion or a motion?
I know this area. I mean, I drive it pretty often. It definitely, it's one of the things that we're lacking, and this is county, but it's in Daytona, but it's one of the things that was lacking is any kind of industrial with outside storage. I get those calls as a realtor, as a broker. I get those calls daily. I'm looking for a small building, but I need more storage yard. You know, they're contractors, they're plumbing supply companies, and we just don't have that. This fits a niche, and it's really away from residential. I don't think it's going to impact anything. It's in an area of mostly industrial. It's a mixture of industrial and some residential, but mostly it's not heavy industrial. I personally don't have any issues with this whatsoever. And unless somebody has something else, I'd be ready to make a motion.
Nope,
All
I
right,
agree.
let's do the CPA first.
Yep. Ready?
Go ahead.
All right. On case CPA-24-004, we find that the future land use amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and vote and move to forward the application, case number CPA-24-004, to the County Council with a recommendation of approval to transmit to the Department of Commerce, DOC, for expedited state review and to the Volusia Growth Management Commission for certification.
Yep. Second.
Okay, which one you guys seconded?
I don't know who was first. Patterson was first.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor to, as stated, for Mr. Costa to forward for the application with recommendation of approval for CPA 24004, and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? Nope. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's take the PUD now.
Case number PUD-24006. I recommend that we forward the rezoning application, case number PUD 24-006, to the County Council for a final action with a recommendation of approval.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor from Mr. Costa for PUD 24006 to forward the rezoning application case to the county council for final action with recommendation of approval, and a second from Mr. Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay.
That was worth your wait, wasn't it?
Okay. Okay, do we have any other public items? Ms. Smith, do we have any other public items?
No, sir.
Do we have any staff items?
No, sir.
Staff comments?
No, sir.
Commission comments?
No, you did a good job, though.
What are we looking at for July? Are we loaded up, or is it a light?
It's lighter than this month.
Okay. This was a little heavier.
Okay.
My other comment on the commission comments is that I want to wish Mr. Bender well his endeavors. I'm sorry to see that he had to go, but he was always he was very reliable, and he was very easygoing and understanding of the public's concerns when things came in front of us. So he will be missed for sure.
And he always had a good
Yeah.
background on things, too, since he was born and raised here also.
I just want to make that comment, though.
Yeah.
And he left me as the old man on the board.
Mm-hmm.
He did have a little bit, well, I don't know, he left for
He
a
left and
month
came
or
back.
two and then come back, so he probably still had more time than mine. We're gonna miss him.
Mhm.
Okay, the other question I had was on the council meeting for the public workshop. When is that gonna be?
It's July 27th.
My birthday.
Want to make sure. It is July 27th.
Okay, that might, I thought it was in June sometime, and I didn't have it written down anywhere, so.
23rd. It is Tuesday, July 23rd, starting at 3 p.m.
23rd, 3 p.m., okay. Okay, the other comment I would like to make was to Mr. Shams. The one case that we had today where he decided to only ask for one variance and move it over instead of with the existing, are we informing the applicants that there may need to request the second variance in the event that it was the fail on his initial variance was the fail?
For that case, the conversation I had with him was that it was kind of like a benefit to him that he was only requesting one variance. I mean, I can start informing them that for cases like that, it may be easier to maintain what you have rather than moving it a certain direction. But he wanted to minimize the amount of variances he was asking for.
But, okay, the existing structure though was 3.5 feet off the property line.
Yes.
And he would ask for a variance of 6 inches.
Yes.
And to me, that would be an encroachment upon the northern property owner, more so than what was already there. And so from my perspective, I don't know how the other board members feel, I'd prefer not to have any more encroachment than need be on adjacent property owners.
Understood.
Rather than take it into consideration for him just to have one variance. I'd rather seen the 3 foot 12 foot on one side and the 3.5 what was the original site plan. I mean, the original impact. Therefore, he wouldn't impact his northern property owner as much. Okay, that was, otherwise, if he didn't have to go for, come back on it, then I would have probably recommended that. But rather than make the guy go through any more turmoil there, I decided to let it go. Okay, any other commission comments? Okay, press and citizen comments. We don't have any. This meeting is adjourned.